When Harper Lane whispers her son's last name in a city emergency room at 2 in the morning, she doesn't realize she's just detonated a bomb that's been ticking for 5 years. The name, Valenti, transforms a routine fever check into a lockdown. Security materializes. Doors seal. And somewhere across the city, the most dangerous man she's ever known receives a call that changes everything. Her son exists. His son exists. And tonight, while Noah burns with fever, enemies who've waited years for exactly this kind of weakness are already moving. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. The fluorescent lights in St. Catherine's emergency department buzzed with the particular frequency of institutional neglect. Harsh, flickering, designed to illuminate suffering without offering comfort. Harper Lane barely noticed. Her world had contracted to the weight of her 5-year-old son in her arms, the heat radiating from his small body like he'd swallowed the sun, and the mounting terror that had driven her here despite every instinct screaming to stay hidden. Noah's head lolled against her shoulder, his breath coming in short, rapid pants that felt wrong against her neck. She'd tried everything at home: cool compresses, fever reducers, prayers whispered into his damp hair, but his temperature had climbed past 104 and kept rising. When he'd started saying things that made no sense, his brown eyes glassy and unfocused, she'd wrapped him in a blanket and run. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and desperation. A man with a bleeding hand sat 3 chairs down, staring at his phone. An elderly woman wheezed into an oxygen mask. The TV mounted in the corner played a muted infomercial, hawking miracle kitchen gadgets to an audience too consumed by their own crises to care. "Next," called the triage nurse, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and purple scrubs decorated with cheerful cartoon bandages that seemed obscene against the backdrop of human misery. Harper stood adjusting Noah's weight and approached the desk. The nurse's badge read Patricia, 25 years of service. "What brings you in tonight?" "My son." Harper's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, trying again. "He has a high fever. It won't break. He's saying things that don't make sense, and I think something's really wrong." Patricia's expression shifted into professional assessment mode, her fingers already moving across the keyboard. "How high?" 104.3 when I checked 20 minutes ago. "How old?" 5. "Name?" "Noah." Harper hesitated, feeling the weight of what came next like a physical thing lodging in her throat. 5 years. 5 years of using her mother's maiden name, of paying cash when possible, of keeping them both invisible. 5 years of safety purchased through anonymity. But Noah was burning up in her arms, and she couldn't think of anything except making that stop. "Last name?" Patricia prompted, fingers poised over keys. Harper swallowed hard. "Valenti." She said it quietly, almost hoping it might slip past unnoticed, but the name landed in the sterile air of the ER like a grenade with the pin pulled. Patricia's fingers froze mid-keystroke. Her eyes flicked up to Harper's face, then down to Noah's flushed features, then back to the computer screen. Something changed in the quality of the silence. "Noah Valenti," Patricia repeated, her voice carefully neutral as she typed. The name appeared on her screen in standard hospital font, ordinary letters forming an extraordinary configuration. Harper watched the nurse's face, saw the moment recognition flickered behind her professional mask. In a city like this, certain names carried weight. The Valenti name carried enough to crush buildings. Date of birth? Harper provided it, along with her own information. Each piece of data another breadcrumb leading straight to a door she'd bolted shut 5 years ago. "Any allergies we should know about?" "No." "Current medications?" "Just children's acetaminophen. It's not working." Patricia nodded, but her attention had split. Even as she asked the standard questions, duration of symptoms, other medical conditions, insurance information, Harper could see her awareness expanding beyond their interaction. The nurse's eyes tracked something over Harper's shoulder. Harper turned. 2 security guards had appeared near the entrance, positioned with the casual alertness of men trained to look decorative until the moment they needed to be anything but. They weren't looking at the bleeding man or the woman with the oxygen mask. They were looking at her. "Mrs. Valenti," Patricia began. "Miss Lane," Harper corrected automatically. "I use my own name." The nurse's eyebrows rose fractionally. "Ms. Lane, then? Well, yeah." Ms. Lane, then, we're going to take Noah back right away. Dr. Reeves is available, and we've got a private bay opening up now. A private bay? Harper's arms tightened around Noah. In her experience, emergency rooms didn't open private anything at 2:07 a.m. for a child with a fever, no matter how high. I thought, isn't there usually a wait? We're not very busy tonight. Patricia stood, coming around the desk with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Follow me. But they were busy. Harper had counted at least 15 people in the waiting room, had seen the ambulance bay flash with lights as she'd approached. She opened her mouth to argue, then felt Noah shudder against her chest. A full-body tremor that decided the matter. Whatever was happening, whoever was being called or alerted or mobilized, didn't matter as much as getting help for her son. Patricia led them through double doors that required a badge to open, into a corridor that smelled less of general suffering and more of serious medicine. The lighting was better here, the floor tiles cleaner. They passed examination rooms with curtains pulled closed, behind which Harper could hear the murmur of doctors and the beep of monitors. In here! Patricia opened the door to a room at the end of the hall, not a curtained bay, but an actual room with walls and a door that closed. The kind of room Harper had only ever seen in medical dramas. The space was larger than necessary for one small patient, equipped with monitoring equipment that looked expensive and new. A pediatric examination table sat in the center, covered with fresh paper. Cabinets lined one wall. A sink gleamed in the corner, and positioned near the door, as if they'd materialized from the walls themselves, stood two more security guards. Harper's instincts screamed. She'd spent 5 years listening to those instincts, learning to read the signs of danger in the tilt of a stranger's head or the weight of a tension that lingered too long. This wasn't standard emergency room protocol. This was something else entirely. Why are they here? She nodded toward the guards, keeping her voice low even as Noah stirred in her arms, mumbling something incoherent about dinosaurs and trucks. Patricia followed her gaze, and for just a moment, her professional mask slipped, revealing something that might have been sympathy. Standard protocol for high-profile cases. High profile? Harper's laugh came out bitter. He's 5 years old with a fever. Yes, Patricia moved to the examination table, adjusting the paper. But he's also a Valenti. The name hung between them, an acknowledgement of the reality Harper had tried to outrun. She'd known, on some level, that using Dante's name would trigger responses. But she hadn't imagined this, the instant transformation of a sick child into a security event. I need you to undress him down to his diaper or underwear, Patricia said, shifting back into nurse mode. Dr. Reeves will be here shortly. I need to get his vitals first. Harper laid Noah on the examination table, her hands shaking slightly as she peeled off his dinosaur print pajamas. His skin was so hot it hurt to touch, and he whimpered as she moved him, his eyes rolling beneath their lids. Shh, baby, I know. We're going to make you feel better. Patricia worked with efficient gentleness, wrapping a blood pressure cuff around Noah's thin arm, placing a pulse oximeter on his finger, sliding a thermometer into his ear. Each beep and reading seemed to deepen the concern in her expression. 104.7, she murmured, noting it on her tablet. Heart rate elevated, BP slightly low. She looked up at Harper. How long has he been like this? The fever started this afternoon, maybe 99, 100. I gave him medicine and it seemed to help. But then, around midnight, it spiked, and he started... Harper's throat tightened. He started talking to people who weren't there, asking why the walls were melting. He didn't know who I was for a minute. Patricia nodded, her fingers moving across her tablet with renewed urgency. Any stiff neck? Difficulty moving his head? I don't know. I didn't check. Rash anywhere? No. Vomiting? Once, about an hour ago. Each answer seemed to slot into some diagnostic framework in Patricia's mind. She set down her tablet and gently palpated Noah's neck, checking his lymph nodes, testing the flexibility of his spine. Noah whimpered but didn't fully wake. Dr. Reeves will want to run some tests, Patricia said finally. But I'm going to be honest with you, Miss Lane. These symptoms concern me. The high fever, the altered mental status, the rapid onset. We need to rule out some serious infections. Fear crystallized in Harper's chest, sharp and cold despite the heat radiating from her son. Like what? I'll let the doctor explain the full differential, but we're going to move quickly. The door opened before Harper could respond. A man in a white coat entered, younger than Harper expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp blue eyes and the kind of focused intensity that suggested he'd seen too many worst-case scenarios to waste time on pleasantries. "Miss Lane, I'm Dr. Reeves." He moved to the examination table, his attention already on Noah rather than on her. "Patricia briefed me on the phone. I need to examine him." "On the phone?" Harper's voice sharpened. "When did she call you?" Dr. Reeves glanced up, and in his eyes, Harper saw the same flicker of recognition that had crossed Patricia's face. "When his name was entered into the system. We have certain protocols for Valentes. For high-priority cases," he corrected smoothly, but they both knew it meant the same thing. "Now, I need to focus on your son. You can be angry about protocol later, but right now I need you to tell me everything you've observed in the last 12 hours. The clinical authority in his voice snapped Harper's attention back to what mattered. She walked him through the timeline, the gradual onset, the spike, the delirium, the vomiting. He listened while examining Noah, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Noah," he said softly, leaning close to the boy's face. "Can you open your eyes for me?" "Noah." Noah's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Dr. Reeves produced a pen light, checking pupil response. He pressed his fingers to Noah's neck, manipulating his head with careful precision, watching for resistance. "Slight nuchal rigidity, Sam," he murmured, more to himself than to Harper. "Patricia, I need a full pediatric meningitis panel. Blood cultures, CBC, comprehensive metabolic panel, and set up for a lumbar puncture. I want infectious disease consulted, and get me an isolation room ready in the PICU." The words hit Harper like physical blows. "Meningitis?" "Doctor." Reeves straightened, and when he met her eyes, she saw the weight of experience in his gaze, the knowledge of how quickly children could deteriorate, how narrow the margin between intervention and catastrophe. "I'm concerned about bacterial meningitis," he said. "The fever, the altered consciousness, the neck stiffness, they fit the pattern. We need to confirm with a spinal tap and blood work, and we need to start antibiotics immediately. If I'm right, every minute counts." Harper's legs went weak. She gripped the edge of the examination table, feeling the room tilt. Is he going to be okay? If we caught it early enough, and if we're aggressive with treatment, yes. But Ms. Lane, his voice gentled fractionally. "I need you to prepare yourself. The next few hours are critical. We're going to do everything we can." Behind her, Harper heard the door open again. She turned to see a woman in an expensive navy suit enter, her presence commanding despite her modest height. She carried a tablet and the air of someone accustomed to managing crises. "Ms. Lane, I'm Rachel Chen, hospital administrator." She extended a hand, which Harper shook automatically, her mind still reeling from meningitis and lumbar puncture in critical hours. "I wanted to personally assure you that Noah is receiving our highest level of care. We've already cleared the pediatric intensive care unit for him, and we have our best team assembling." "Why?" The question came out sharper than Harper intended. "Why is a hospital administrator here at 2 a.m. for one sick child?" Rachel Chen's expression remained professionally pleasant, but her eyes showed calculation. "We take all our patients seriously, but when circumstances are sensitive, we like to ensure proper protocols are followed." "You keep saying that. Protocol. Sensitive. But what you mean is that someone recognized his last name, and now you're all scrambling because you're afraid of—" Harper bit off the words, but they hung in the air anyway, unspoken, but understood. "Afraid of Dante." "Miss Lane," Rachel said carefully, "our priority is Noah's health, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we've notified relevant parties about his admission." Harper's blood turned to ice. "What parties?" "His father is listed as next of kin in the records. Emergency contact." "Those are old records." Harper's voice rose despite her efforts to control it. "From before. I didn't authorize you to call anyone." "The records are current enough to be legally binding," Rachel replied, her tone sympathetic but firm. "And given the severity of Noah's condition, we're required to notify all legal guardians." "You called him." It wasn't a question. Harper could feel the walls closing in, the careful distance she'd maintained for 5 years collapsing in the space of an hour. "You called Dante Valenti." We followed protocol, Rachel repeated, and this time there was steel beneath the sympathy. And Miss Lane, I'm going to be frank with you. If Noah is as sick as Dr. Reeves believes, you're going to need all the resources you can get. Mr. Valenti has considerable resources. Harper wanted to scream that resources wouldn't protect Noah from the life Dante lived, from the enemies who circled men like him looking for weakness, from the violence that clung to the Valenti name like a shadow. But Noah chose that moment to cry out, a thin, pained sound that cut through every other consideration. She turned back to the table, brushing his damp hair from his forehead. I'm here, baby. Mama's here. Doctor. Reeves was already in motion, snapping orders to Patricia, who'd been joined by 2 other nurses. They moved around Noah with choreographed efficiency, starting an IV, drawing blood, hooking him up to monitors that began their steady beeping, heartbeat, oxygen saturation, blood pressure. Harper watched them work, feeling useless and terrified. Someone pressed a clipboard into her hands. Consent forms for the lumbar puncture, for treatment, for everything they were about to do to her son. She signed them without reading, her signature shaky. We're taking him up to the PICU now, Dr. Reeves said. You can come with us, but Miss Lane, the procedure room is restricted. You'll have to wait outside while we do the spinal tap. Harper nodded, not trusting her voice. They were already moving Noah's table toward the door, IV bags swinging from their poles, monitors trailing behind like electronic leashes. She followed, dimly aware of Rachel Chen shadowing them, of the security guards falling into formation like an honor guard for a sick little boy who should have been sleeping safely in his bed. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt eternal and too quick all at once. Noah drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring words that made no sense. Harper held his hand, careful of the IV line, and tried to remember how to breathe. The pediatric intensive care unit was quieter than the ER, but no less intense. Everything gleamed with recent cleaning. Nurses moved with purposeful calm behind a central station that looked like mission control. Private rooms lined the perimeter, glass-fronted for observation, each containing equipment that Harper didn't want to understand the purpose of. Room 408, Doctor, Reeves directed, and they wheeled Noah into a space that had clearly been prepared in the minutes since Patricia's phone call. Extra monitors. A crash cart positioned nearby. Supplies arranged with military precision. Ms. Lane, a nurse touched her arm gently. We need to take him into the procedure room now. There's a family waiting area just down the hall. It shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. 30 minutes to insert a needle into her son's spine, to withdraw fluid that might confirm their worst fears, to start antibiotics that might save his life, or might be too late. 30 minutes during which she could do nothing but wait and pray and try not to imagine every terrible possibility. Can I? Harper's voice broke. Can I kiss him first? Of course. Harper leaned over Noah's still form, pressing her lips to his burning forehead. I love you, sweetheart. Be brave for Mama. His eyes fluttered open for just a moment, glazed and unfocused. Mama? I'm here. I'll be right here when you wake up. Then they were taking him away, through doors she couldn't follow, and Harper was left standing in the hallway with Rachel Chen and 2 security guards, feeling like she'd just watched her heart get wheeled out of reach. This way, Rachel said, guiding her toward a small room furnished with uncomfortable chairs and outdated magazines. A coffee maker sat on a side table next to a basket of tea bags and powered creamer. Someone had tried to make it welcoming, but it remained what it was, a place for people to fall apart while waiting to learn if their worlds would end. Harper sank into a chair, her body finally registering the adrenaline crash. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together, squeezing until her knuckles went white. Can I get you anything? Rachel asked. Coffee? Water? Answers. Harper looked up at the administrator. How long ago did you call him? Rachel checked her tablet. About 45 minutes ago. Did he say he was coming? He didn't say anything. He ended the call. Rachel's expression suggested she'd expected more reaction and found the silence more unnerving. 45 minutes. Depending on where Dante had been, he could arrive at any moment, or he might not come at all. Harper didn't know which possibility frightened her more. She'd met Dante Valenti 6 years ago in a coffee shop where she'd worked to pay her way through community college. He'd been different from the other customers, too still, too observant, carrying the kind of presence that made people give him space without understanding why. When he'd asked her to dinner, she'd said yes despite every warning sign, drawn to the intensity of his attention, to the way he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. 3 months later, they were married. 6 months after that, she understood what he really was. Not just wealthy, not just connected, but dangerous. The kind of man who could make people disappear with a phone call. The kind of man who kept his hands clean while blood pooled at his feet. She tried to ignore it, to convince herself that love could exist separately from the violence, that she could be the light in his darkness. But violence had a way of spreading, of contaminating everything it touched. When she'd realized she was pregnant, she'd also realized she couldn't raise a child in that shadow. So she'd left, quietly, carefully, using resources she'd been secretly building for months. She'd disappeared into a different city, used her mother's maiden name, paid cash, worked jobs that didn't require official paperwork. She'd given birth to Noah in a hospital 2 states away, had him registered under her name, had spent 5 years making sure they stayed invisible. Until tonight. Until fever and fear had driven her to an emergency room where she'd spoken the one name that could shatter their anonymity. The door to the waiting room opened. Harper's head jerked up, expecting Dr. Reeves with news or Rachel with updates. Instead, she saw a man in his 60s, gray-haired and expensive-suited, flanked by 2 more security personnel. His eyes swept the room with tactical precision before settling on her. "Miss Lane." He inclined his head, polite but not warm. "My name is Vincent Calabrese. I work for Mr. Valenti." Of course he did. Dante wouldn't come himself, not immediately. He'd send someone to assess, to confirm, to control the situation before committing his personal attention. "I don't need his lawyers," Harper said. "I need my son to get better." "I'm not a lawyer," Vincent replied. "I'm head of security, and I'm here to ensure Noah's safety while he's vulnerable." "He's in a hospital. He's safe." Vincent's expression suggested he found her naivete almost charming. "Ms. Lane, the moment Noah's name entered this hospital's system, it became accessible to anyone with the right connections. And there are people, many people, who would very much like to know that Dante Valenti has a child." The implication settled over Harper like a weight. He's 5 years old. What threat could he possibly pose to anyone? He's leverage. Vincent moved further into the room, his security detail maintaining position by the door. He's pressure. He's a weakness that didn't exist an hour ago. And there are families in this city who've been waiting years for exactly this kind of opportunity. Harper's hands clenched in her lap. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before calling Dante, before making this a thing that needed security details and locked corridors." "We didn't make it a thing, Ms. Lane. You did, when you gave his name to the intake nurse. You knew what that would trigger. On some level, you had to know." He was right, and she hated him for it. She had known. In that moment when Noah's fever had climbed past any temperature she could ignore, when his eyes had looked at her without recognition, she'd made a calculation. Safety versus secrecy. Noah's immediate survival versus their long-term invisibility. She'd chosen survival, and now she was living with the consequences. "How long until he gets here?" she asked quietly. Vincent checked his watch. "He was 20 minutes out when I left him, so any minute now." Harper's stomach lurched. 5 years. She'd had 5 years to imagine this confrontation, to practice what she might say, to build armor against the intensity of Dante's presence. None of it felt adequate now. "Does he—" She stopped, swallowed. "Does he know about Noah? That he exists?" Something that might have been sympathy flickered across Vincent's weathered features. "He knows now." The implications of that simple statement crashed over Harper. Dante had spent 5 years believing she'd left him, possibly believing she'd never loved him at all. Now he was learning that she'd carried his child, had given birth to his son, had raised that son in secret while he grieved a marriage and mourned what might have been. "Ms. Lane," Rachel Chen stood in the doorway, her face carefully neutral. "Dr. Reeves asked me to give you an update. They've completed the lumbar puncture. Noah did well. They're bringing him back to the room now, and they've started broad-spectrum antibiotics while they wait for culture results." Relief made Harper's legs weak. "Can I see him?" "In a few minutes. They're getting him settled." Harper stood, needing to move, to do something with the energy coursing through her. She paced to the window, looking out at the city lights stretching toward dawn. Somewhere out there, Dante was coming. Coming to see the son he'd never known existed. Coming to claim what she'd tried to hide. The sound of commotion in the hallway made her turn. Voices raised, not in anger, but in recognition. The particular quality of attention that powerful people attracted like gravity wells. Vincent straightened, his hand moving to his phone. Then the door opened, and Dante Valenti walked into the waiting room. He'd changed in 5 years, though perhaps only she would notice the differences. A few silver threads in his dark hair, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But the core of him remained, the coiled intensity, the predatory stillness, the sense that violence was always an option, held in reserve. His dark eyes found her immediately, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other across 5 years of silence. Harper. Her name and his voice hit like a physical thing, carrying currents of anger and relief and questions too large for this sterile room. Dante? She straightened her spine, refusing to show the fear making her heart race. You didn't have to come. Didn't I? He moved further into the room, his presence filling it despite the space. You disappeared 5 years ago. Now I get a call that says Harper Lane's son, Noah Valenti, is in the ICU with possible meningitis. Tell me, Harper, did I misunderstand something? Or do I have a 5-year-old son I knew nothing about? His voice remained level, controlled, but Harper could see the fury coiled beneath his calm. This was Dante at his most dangerous, not when he shouted, but when he went very, very quiet. You have a son, she said, meeting his eyes. His name is Noah. He's 5 years old. And right now, he's fighting an infection that could kill him, so maybe we could table the interrogation until he's stable? Dante's jaw tightened. Where is he? Room 408, but they're still getting him settled, and he was already moving, striding toward the door with Vincent falling into step behind him. Rachel Chen made a small sound of protest, but she was wise enough not to physically attempt to stop Dante Valenti from seeing his son. Harper hurried after them, her exhaustion forgotten in the surge of renewed anxiety. They moved through the PICU like a storm front, Dante's intensity parting staff and visitors ahead of him. He stopped at room 408, his hand on the door handle, and for just a moment Harper saw something crack in his control. Uncertainty. Fear. The recognition that whatever lay on the other side of this door would change him irrevocably. Then he pushed it open and stepped inside. Noah lay in the hospital bed looking impossibly small against the white sheets. IV lines ran to his arms. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking vitals that apparently satisfied medical standards, even as they terrified Harper. His eyes were closed, his face flushed with fever, his breathing shallow but steady. Dante stopped 3 feet from the bed, frozen. Harper watched his face, saw the exact moment recognition hit, the shape of Noah's jaw, the line of his nose, the dark hair curling against his forehead. Features that Harper saw every day, but which Dante was encountering for the first time, stamped on the face of a child he'd never known existed. 5 years, he said finally, his voice rough. You were pregnant when you left. Yes. You hid my son from me for 5 years. I protected him for 5 years, Harper corrected, moving to Noah's other side. From your world. From the violence that follows you, from enemies who would use him exactly the way Vincent described, as leverage. Dante's eyes snapped to hers, dark and burning. And how's that protection working out now, Harper? He's in the ICU. You had to use my name to get him care. You brought him into my world anyway. You just waited until the worst possible moment to do it. The accusation stung because it was partially true. She'd tried to keep Noah safe through distance, and it had worked right up until the moment it didn't. The moment her child's life became more important than her carefully maintained invisibility. Dr. Reeves entered before she could formulate a response, his attention immediately focusing on Dante with the same flicker of recognition everyone seemed to have. Mr. Valenti, I'm Dr. Marcus Reeves. I'm treating Noah. Dante turned to him, and Harper saw the shift in his posture. From personal to professional, from shaken father to man accustomed to demanding answers. What's wrong with my son? We're still confirming, but preliminary findings suggest acute bacterial meningitis. We've started aggressive antibiotic therapy, and we're monitoring him closely for complications. Complications? Dante's voice went flat. What complications? Dr. Reeves met his eyes steadily, unintimidated. Brain swelling, seizures, hearing loss. In severe cases, it can be fatal. But Mr. Valenti, we caught it early. Miss Lane brought him in as soon as symptoms became serious. That timing matters. Dante looked at Harper, and for just a moment, the anger in his eyes gave way to something more complicated. How long has he been sick? Since this afternoon. The fever started small, but by midnight, her voice caught. By midnight, he didn't recognize me. He was talking to people who weren't there, and you didn't call me. I didn't know if you'd come. I didn't know if you'd care. It's been 5 years, Dante. For all I knew, you'd moved on. His laugh was bitter. Moved on, right? He returned his attention to Dr. Reeves. What do you need? Best specialists? Experimental treatments? I don't care about cost. What we need is time, Dr. Reeves said. The antibiotics have to work. We've consulted infectious disease, and they agree with our treatment plan. Noah is getting exactly what he needs. More resources won't make the bacteria die faster. It was clearly not the answer Dante wanted, but he accepted it with a sharp nod. Then we wait. You don't have to stay, Harper said quietly. You have other things? I'm not leaving. Dante pulled a chair close to Noah's bed, his eyes never leaving the small face on the pillow. I've missed 5 years. I'm not missing another minute. Dr. Reeves cleared his throat. I'll give you some privacy, but Mr. Valenti, Miss Lane, we're going to need to keep Noah here for at least several days. And I have to tell you, there's something else we're concerned about. Harper's heart, which had just begun to settle, kicked back into overdrive. What? The preliminary cultures are showing a particularly aggressive strain. It's responding to antibiotics, which is good. But there's significant inflammation. We may need to consider more aggressive interventions if the swelling doesn't improve. What kind of interventions? Dante's voice had gone very quiet. Potentially surgical, to relieve pressure if it builds. But we're not there yet, and I don't want to borrow trouble. I just wanted you both to be aware of the possibilities. He left them with that weight, closing the door gently behind him. Harper sank into the chair on Noah's other side, her legs finally giving out. Surgery, she whispered. They might have to. They won't. Dante's hand covered Noah's, gentle, despite the tension vibrating through him. He's strong. He'll fight this. You don't know that. You don't know him at all. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, driven by fear and exhaustion. Dante's eyes lifted to hers, and she saw pain flash across his features before his control reasserted itself. No, he agreed quietly. I don't, because you made sure of that. They sat in silence, the beeping of monitors marking time, watching their son sleep while antibiotics dripped into his veins, and somewhere in the city, dawn began to break. And Harper understood with crystalline clarity that everything was about to change. Whatever came next, there would be no more running, no more hiding. The moment she'd spoken Noah's full name in that ER, she'd opened a door that could never be closed again. She just hoped they would all survive what came through it. The first hour passed in a silence broken only by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the soft hiss of oxygen flowing through Noah's nasal cannula. Harper watched the IV drip, counting drops as if the precision of her attention could somehow accelerate the antibiotics' journey through her son's small body. Across the bed, Dante sat motionless, his eyes fixed on Noah's face with an intensity that made Harper's chest ache despite everything. She'd forgotten this about him, the absolute quality of his focus when something mattered. He didn't check his phone, didn't speak to Vincent, who stood sentinel by the door, didn't acknowledge the nurses who came and went with practiced efficiency. He simply watched his son breathe, as if the force of his will alone could keep those small lungs expanding and contracting. He likes dinosaurs, Harper said finally, unable to bear the silence any longer. Specifically, velociraptors. He has this plastic one that goes everywhere with him. Blue, with yellow stripes. I had to leave it at home when we came here, and he's going to be upset when he wakes up. Dante's eyes lifted to hers, unreadable. Tell me about him. It wasn't a request. Harper heard the command beneath the quiet words. The barely restrained need to know everything he'd missed compressed into 5 years of absence. She should have refused on principle, should have made him understand that he didn't get to demand anything after the life he'd lived, the choices he'd made that had driven her away in the first place. But looking at his face, at the tight control around his mouth, the way his hand trembled slightly where it rested near Noah's, she found she couldn't deny him this. "He's smart," she began, her voice soft. "Too smart sometimes. He asks questions I don't know how to answer. Last week he wanted to know why the sky is blue but space is black. I tried to explain about atmosphere and light scattering, but he wasn't satisfied. He wanted to know what happens to the blue when you go high enough." "What did you tell him?" "That maybe it doesn't disappear. Maybe it just spreads out so thin we can't see it anymore, but it's still there." She smoothed Noah's blanket, needing something to do with her hands. He liked that answer. He said the blue was hiding, like a secret. Dante's jaw tightened. "What else?" "He's gentle. With animals. With other kids. There's a boy at his daycare who hits sometimes, and Noah never hits back. He just walks away and finds something else to do. The teachers say he's unusually patient for his age." "Daycare," Dante's voice went flat. "You work." "Of course I work. How else would we survive?" "You could have..." He stopped, visibly restraining himself. "What do you do?" "I'm a medical transcriptionist. Work from home most days, which means I can be here when Noah gets back from daycare. The pay isn't great, but it's steady, and I can make my own hours." Harper watched understanding settle over Dante's features, the picture of their life taking shape in his mind. Not the comfortable existence he could have provided, but a careful, modest life built on Harper's determination to stay invisible. She waited for judgment, for the criticism she knew he was capable of delivering with surgical precision. Instead, he said, "You've done well. He looks healthy, happy." The unexpected acknowledgement made her throat tight. "I've tried." "I know." His eyes returned to Noah. "But you shouldn't have had to do it alone." "I chose to do it alone. There's a difference." "Did you?" Dante leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since entering the room, he looked directly at her with the full weight of his attention. "Or did I make that choice for you when I became someone you had to run from?" Harper had prepared for many versions of this conversation over the years. Dante angry, Dante threatening, Dante trying to take Noah away. She hadn't prepared for Dante sitting in a hospital room at 4 in the morning, asking questions that sounded uncomfortably like self-reflection. "You made choices," she said carefully. "I made different ones. We both live with the consequences. Except I didn't know there were consequences. I thought you left because you couldn't handle my life. I didn't know you were pregnant. I didn't know I had a son who collects plastic dinosaurs and asks questions about disappearing blue." The pain in his voice was real, and Harper hated that it affected her. She'd spent 5 years building armor against Dante Valenti, constructing walls between her memories of who he'd been to her and the reality of what he'd become. Those walls felt dangerously thin now. "If I'd told you," she said quietly, "what would you have done?" "I would have..." He stopped, and she saw him actually consider the question rather than defaulting to the easy answer. "I don't know. 5 years ago, I might have tried to lock you both away somewhere I considered safe, controlled everything, made you prisoners in a gilded cage because I wouldn't have known any other way to protect what mattered. And now? Now I've had 5 years to learn that control is an illusion, that safety can't be enforced at gunpoint, that sometimes the thing you're holding too tight is exactly what slips away." A soft knock interrupted them. "Doctor." Reeves entered, accompanied by a woman in her 40s wearing a white coat embroidered with Dr. Sarah Chen, Infectious Disease. "Mr. Valenti, Miss Lane," Dr. Reeves said. "This is Dr. Chen. She's reviewed Noah's labs and the preliminary culture results." Dr. Chen moved to the computer terminal, pulling up screens filled with numbers and graphs that meant nothing to Harper. The lumbar puncture confirmed bacterial meningitis, likely Streptococcus pneumonia. The good news is that it's responding to our antibiotic regimen. His white cell count is elevated, but not critically so, and the inflammation markers, while high, are beginning to stabilize. "And the bad news?" Dante's voice carried the weight of someone who knew there was always bad news. "The bacterial load was significant, which means the infection had more time to establish than we'd like. The swelling we're seeing in his brain tissue is concerning. Not critical yet, but we're monitoring it closely. If it increases, we may need to intervene more aggressively. Harper's hands clenched in her lap. The surgery you mentioned. It's one option. We could also try hyperosmolar therapy, medications to reduce the swelling. But I want to be clear, both approaches come with risks. For now, we watch and we wait. The next 12 hours are crucial. What are we watching for? Dante asked. Doctor? Chen's expression remained professionally neutral, but Harper saw the concern beneath it. Changes in consciousness level, increased agitation or lethargy, seizure activity, any sign that the pressure is building faster than the antibiotics can work. And if we see those signs, then we move quickly. But Mr. Valenti, Miss Lane, try not to borrow trouble. Right now, Noah is stable. The antibiotics are working. We have every reason to hope for a full recovery. Hope felt like a luxury Harper couldn't afford. She nodded mechanically, processing the information without really accepting it. 12 hours. 12 hours of watching her son sleep, of tracking every beep and alarm, of praying that his small body could fight off an infection that sounded increasingly terrifying with each medical update. The doctors left after checking Noah's vitals and adjusting his IV drip. Vincent remained by the door, a silent reminder that this was no ordinary hospital vigil. The security detail had expanded since Dante's arrival. Harper had counted at least 6 unfamiliar men positioned in the corridor, their presence transforming the pediatric ICU into something that felt more like a fortress. "Are they really necessary?" she asked, nodding toward Vincent. Dante followed her gaze. "You know they are. I know you think they are. But Dante, Noah is 5 years old and fighting meningitis. Who exactly do you think is going to attack him?" "You'd be surprised." Dante's voice went cold. "The moment I walked into this hospital, at least 3 different families learned I have a son. By now, the information has spread to a dozen more. They're all doing the same calculation, wondering how they can use this against me. Use a sick child against you. Listen to yourself." "I am listening, and I'm hearing reality, which is something you apparently stopped doing 5 years ago when you convinced yourself that running was the same as being safe." He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the parking lot. Dawn had broken fully now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscene given the circumstances. "You want to know why I have 6 men outside this room? Because 3 hours ago, someone tried to access Noah's medical records. Someone who doesn't work for this hospital, who has no legitimate reason to know anything about him." Harper's blood went cold. "What?" Vincent's people caught it, traced the attempt back to an IP address registered to a known associate of the Castellano family. "They're one of my competitors, and not the friendly kind." Dante turned from the window, his dark eyes finding hers. "So yes, Harper, the security is necessary, because your son, our son, just became the most valuable target in this city." The implications crashed over her in waves. She'd known, abstractly, that using Dante's name would create complications, but she'd imagined legal complications, custody battles, uncomfortable conversations. Not this, not actual danger to Noah's life beyond the bacteria already attacking his brain. "We can move him," Dante continued, his tone shifting into problem-solving mode. "I have a private medical facility, fully staffed, better equipped than this place, and secure. We could have him transported within the hour." "No." Harper stood, matching his intensity. "He's stable here. Moving him could be dangerous, and I'm not going to risk his health because you're paranoid about your enemies." "It's not paranoia when they're actually trying to access his records." "They accessed a computer file, Dante. That's not the same as storming the ICU with guns." "Not yet." His voice dropped, taking on the quality she remembered from their marriage. The tone that meant he was about to say something she wouldn't want to hear, but needed to understand. "But it will be. The Castellanos don't do subtle. If they think they can get leverage on me through Noah, they'll try. And hospital security, no matter how good, isn't designed to stop the kind of people who work for them." Harper wanted to argue, but the logic was sound even if she hated it. She'd left Dante specifically to escape this world, to build a life where her child wouldn't be a chess piece in someone else's power game. Now that world had found them anyway, invited in by her own desperate use of a name she'd avoided for 5 years. "If we move him and something goes wrong," she said quietly, If the transport triggers complications, or if your facility isn't as good as you think, and we lose time we can't afford to lose, I will never forgive you. Do you understand that? Dante met her eyes, and for a moment she saw past his control to the fear beneath. He was terrified. As terrified as she was, maybe more, because he was looking at a son he'd just met and calculating all the ways he could lose him before really knowing him at all. I understand, he said, but Harper, I need you to understand something too. I've built my life on making hard choices, on weighing risks and acting decisively. But I can't— His voice caught just slightly. I can't lose him. Not when I just found him. So if the choice is between a small medical risk and a larger security risk, I'm going to choose the option that keeps him breathing. That's my choice to make. I'm his mother. And I'm his father. Dante's voice hardened. Like it or not, that matters now. You don't get to make unilateral decisions anymore. The argument that rose in Harper's throat died when Noah stirred, a small sound of distress escaping his lips. Both she and Dante moved simultaneously, reaching for him, their hands colliding over his small body. For a frozen moment, they stayed like that, connected through their son, close enough that Harper could smell Dante's cologne beneath the hospital antiseptic, could feel the heat of his presence after 5 years of cold absence. Then Noah's eyes fluttered open, glazed and confused. Mama? Harper found her voice first, gentle and reassuring despite the tension crackling through the room. I'm here, baby. Right here. His eyes tracked slowly, finding her face. Then they moved, landing on Dante, and confusion deepened into something close to fear. Who's that? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Harper felt Dante go very still beside her, waiting for her answer, and she realized with sudden clarity that what she said next would matter, would set the tone for everything that came after. This is Dante, she said softly. He's your father, Noah. Noah's brow furrowed, his small face scrunching in concentration despite the fever still flushing his cheeks. My daddy? Yes. But you said I don't have a daddy. You said he was far away. Harper's heart cracked. I was wrong, sweetheart. He was far away, but now he's here. And he wants to meet you. Noah's gaze shifted back to Dante, assessing with the brutal honesty of children. Why are you so scary? The question might have been funny under different circumstances. Dante's expression flickered through several emotions before settling on something that might have been amusement tinged with pain. I'm not scary, he said, his voice gentler than Harper had heard it in years. I'm just tall. And you have mean eyes. Noah, Harper admonished softly, but Dante held up a hand. It's okay. He's right. I do have mean eyes sometimes. But not for you, Noah. Never for you. Noah considered this with the seriousness of someone weighing a major philosophical question. Do you like dinosaurs? The shift in topic would have given Harper whiplash if she weren't so familiar with how 5-year-olds processed information. Dante, to his credit, didn't miss a beat. I don't know much about them, he admitted, but I'd like to learn. Do you have a favorite? Velociraptor. They're the smartest. They hunt in packs and they can open doors. Noah's voice was getting stronger, animation replacing some of the confusion. Do you know about the Jurassic period? No. Will you teach me? It was the right answer. Harper watched Noah's face light up despite his illness, saw him start to launch into an explanation of prehistoric time periods that he'd absorbed from countless documentaries and picture books. But then his expression crumpled, and his hand moved weakly toward his head. Mama, it hurts. My head hurts. Harper was already reaching for the call button when the door opened and a nurse appeared, her timing either coincidental or the result of constantly monitored vitals showing Noah's distress. We can give him something for the pain, the nurse said, checking the monitors. His temperature is still elevated but holding steady. That's good. She administered medication through the IV, explaining what she was doing in a cheerful voice that Noah seemed to find reassuring. Within minutes, his features relaxed, the pain receding under the warmth of pharmaceuticals. Better? Harper asked. Noah's eyes were already drifting closed again. Tired. Then sleep, sweetheart. We'll be right here. Both of you? His gaze moved between Harper and Dante, seeking confirmation of this new reality. Both of us, Dante confirmed, his voice rough. Satisfied, Noah let sleep reclaim him. His breathing evened out, the monitors maintaining their steady rhythm. The nurse made a few notes on her tablet and slipped out, leaving Harper and Dante alone again with their sleeping son between them. "He called you Mama," Dante said after a long silence. "That's what he calls me." "I meant—" He stopped, searching for words. "He trusts you completely. Looked to you first, needed your reassurance before he could accept anything else. That's what children do with their primary caregiver." "I know." Dante's hand moved to Noah's, his large fingers dwarfing the small ones they surrounded. "I'm just realizing what I missed. First words, first steps, first everything. You got all of that, and I got a child with meningitis and enemies already circling? Yes, your timing is spectacularly bad." She'd meant it as dark humor, a release valve for the pressure building in her chest. But Dante's expression went flat, and she realized she'd hit something raw. "I'm sorry," she said. "That was true?" He looked at her, and the naked pain in his eyes made her breath catch. "You're right. I show up at the worst possible moment, bring danger with me, and expect—" "What exactly? That you'll trust me with his safety when you ran specifically because you didn't?" "I ran because I was pregnant and terrified, because I knew your world, knew what it would mean to raise a child in it. I wasn't wrong about that, Dante. Look at what's happening now. We've been here less than 6 hours, and already someone's trying to use him against you. You think I don't know that?" Dante stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back, energy radiating from him like heat. "You think I don't look at him lying there and realize that every enemy I've made, every deal I've brokered, every choice I've taken over the years has just created a target on his back? I know exactly what I've done, Harper. I know exactly what I am." "Then why come at all? Why not just—" She gestured helplessly. "Let us stay hidden?" Dante stopped pacing, turning to face her fully. "Because he's my son. Because 5 years ago you left, and I spent every day since wondering what I'd done to make you disappear. I tore this city apart looking for you. I called in every favor, pressured every contact, checked every lead that might tell me where you'd gone or why. And then tonight, I get a call that says you're here, that you have my child, and you honestly think I could stay away? I think you could have chosen not to be the kind of man people need to run from in the first place." The words landed like a slap. Dante absorbed them, his jaw working as he processed the accusation beneath the statement. "You're right," he said finally. "I could have, but I didn't. I made different choices, built a different life, and now we're both living with consequences neither of us wanted." A soft knock interrupted them. Vincent appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. "We have a situation." Dante's demeanor shifted instantly. The emotional conversation shelved in favor of immediate threat assessment. "What kind?" "Security picked up chatter. Castellano's people are moving. Nothing concrete yet, but the pattern suggests they're planning something." "When?" "Unknown, but they're asking questions about hospital protocols, shift changes, access points." Vincent's eyes flicked to Harper. "They want the boy." Harper's blood turned to ice. "They want— What do you mean, they want him?" "They want leverage," Dante said, his voice gone cold and tactical. "They think if they can take Noah, they can control me. Force concessions, gain territory, extract promises. It's basic strategy." "He's a child, a sick child." "He's also the son of Dante Valenti, which makes him valuable." Vincent pulled out his phone, showing Dante something on the screen. "We've increased the perimeter, but this hospital has too many access points. Service entrances, loading docks, tunnels connecting to the main building. We can secure the immediate area, but if they're serious about this, then we move," Dante said. "Now." "No." Harper stood, planting herself between Dante and Noah's bed. "Absolutely not. Moving him is dangerous. Dr. Chen said the next 12 hours are critical for monitoring," Dante interrupted. "And she's right, which is why we're moving him to my facility where he can be monitored by specialists who aren't worried about being overrun by the Castellano family." "Your facility isn't a real hospital. It's— What? Some private clinic you keep for your people when they get shot doing illegal things?" Dante's expression hardened. It's a fully accredited medical center with a pediatric intensive care unit, a surgical suite, and doctors who've treated everything from gunshot wounds to pediatric meningitis. And it's secure in ways this building could never be. He's stable here. Moving him could trigger complications. You heard what Dr. Reeves said about the swelling. I heard him say we need to monitor it closely. We can do that just as well somewhere safer. Safer for who, Dante? For Noah, or for your conscience when someone tries to kidnap him and you weren't able to stop it because you were too proud to admit you created the situation in the first place? The accusation hung between them, sharp and cutting. Vincent cleared his throat uncomfortably, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. We'll bring Dr. Reeves, Dante said finally, his voice controlled, and Dr. Chen. Whatever specialist Noah needs, they'll come with us. We'll have a full medical team in the transport ambulance, every precaution possible. But Harper, we're running out of time to debate this. If the Castellanos are moving, we need to move faster. Harper looked at Noah, sleeping peacefully under the influence of pain medication and antibiotics. He looked so small in the hospital bed, so vulnerable. The thought of moving him, of jostling him through the city, while his brain fought swelling and his body fought infection, made her want to scream. But the thought of armed men breaking into his room, of violence erupting around her sleeping son, was somehow worse. If anything happens to him, she said quietly, turning to face Dante, if this transport causes any complications that set back his recovery or makes things worse, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. Do you understand me? Dante met her eyes, and she saw her own fear reflected back. I understand, but Harper, if we stay here and they get to him, we'll both regret it forever. He was right, and she hated it. Hated that his world had found them, that her careful years of hiding had been undone in one desperate hospital visit, that she was now making impossible choices between medical risk and security risk for her 5-year-old son. How long to arrange transport? She asked. Vincent checked his phone. 15 minutes for the ambulance, 20 to have the team assembled. We can be moving in 30 minutes or less. 30 minutes. Harper looked at the monitors, at the IV drip, at Noah's flushed face relaxed in medicated sleep. 30 minutes to upend their entire world again. Make it happen, Dante said. And Vincent, no one knows where we're going except people we absolutely trust. No electronic records, no paper trail. As far as anyone is concerned, Noah Valenti disappeared from this hospital. Vincent nodded and disappeared to make arrangements. Dante turned to Harper, and for a moment they simply looked at each other across 5 years of distance and one sleeping child. I never wanted this for him, Dante said quietly. If I could change what I am, what I've built. But you can't, Harper finished. This is who you are, and now Noah has to live with it too. We all do. The truth of that settled over the room like a weight. They were bound now, by Noah, by danger, by choices made years ago that were only now showing their full consequences. Whatever happened next, there would be no more running, no more hiding, no more pretending that distance could keep them safe. The world had found them. Now they would have to find a way to survive it. 28 minutes later, Harper stood in the pre-dawn shadows of St. Catherine's loading dock, watching a medical transport team prepare to move her son through the city like contraband. The ambulance idling before her bore no obvious markings, nothing to indicate its cargo was the 5-year-old heir to a criminal empire who might not survive the week. Dr. Reeves emerged from the building, his expression tight with professional disapproval masked as clinical concern. The transport is medically sound, he said, directing his words to Harper rather than Dante. We've stabilized him as much as possible. The IV lines are secured, monitors are portable, and I'll be in the ambulance with him the entire time. You're coming? Harper hadn't expected that. Mr. Valenti made it worth my while. Dr. Reeves glanced at Dante, who stood 10 feet away coordinating with Vincent and a security team that had somehow doubled in the last half hour. And honestly, Ms. Lane, if I let you transport a critically ill child without medical supervision, I deserve to lose my license. This way, at least I can intervene if something goes wrong. If something goes wrong. The words echoed in Harper's mind as orderlies wheeled Noah's bed through the loading dock doors. Her son remained deeply asleep, the sedation they'd administered for transport keeping him blissfully unaware of the upheaval happening around him. The monitors attached to his small body beeped their steady reassurance, but Harper's heart hammered irregularly in her chest. "We're ready," Vincent announced, approaching Dante with the efficiency of a man who'd orchestrated this kind of tactical movement before. 3-vehicle convoy, medical transport in the middle, security front and back. Route has been cleared and we've got eyes on every major intersection. ETA to the facility is 18 minutes. Dante nodded, then turned to Harper. "You'll ride in the ambulance with Noah and Dr. Reeves. I'll be in the lead vehicle." "No." Harper moved closer, lowering her voice, even though Vincent could certainly hear. "If I'm trusting you enough to move my son through the city in the middle of the night, you're trusting me enough to tell me where we're going." Something flickered in Dante's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or reassessment. "North Harbor, the old shipping district. I own a medical complex there, completely self-contained. 24-hour staffing, latest equipment, everything Noah needs. And no oversight, no external accountability. Just your people, your facility, your control." "Yes." Dante didn't flinch from the accusation. "That's exactly what it is, and right now, that's what keeps him alive." Harper wanted to argue, but the loading dock doors opened again and Dr. Chen appeared, carrying a medical bag and looking far more alert than anyone had a right to be at 5 a.m. She headed straight for the ambulance, conferring with Dr. Reeves in the rapid shorthand of medical professionals preparing for potential crisis. "Ms. Lane," one of the orderlies gestured toward the ambulance. "We need to load now." Harper climbed into the back of the vehicle, the familiar smell of antiseptic and medical equipment washing over her. The space was larger than a standard ambulance, configured more like a mobile ICU than emergency transport. Noah's bed locked into place with mechanical precision, the monitors transferring seamlessly to the ambulance's own systems. Dr. Reeves settled onto a bench seat, his attention already on the screens displaying Noah's vitals. Dr. Chen took position on the opposite side, her hands moving through a final check of emergency medications and equipment. "Heart rate steady," Dr. Reeves murmured. "Oxygen saturation 98%. Temperature holding at 103.2. Higher than I'd like. But the antibiotics need more time." The ambulance doors closed, sealing Harper into the confined space with her unconscious son and 2 doctors who'd been pulled into this chaos by the sheer gravitational force of Dante Valenti's name. Through the small window between the patient compartment and the driver's cab, she could see Vincent climbing into the front seat. The vehicle lurched into motion, smooth and careful but still jarring enough to make Harper grip the edge of Noah's bed. The monitors continued their steady beeping, unchanged by the movement. Dr. Reeves met her eyes across the small space. "He's stable," the doctor said, his voice gentle. "This transport isn't ideal, but he's as ready as we can make him." Harper nodded, not trusting her voice. Through the rear windows, she could see the tail vehicle, a black SUV with tinted windows that screamed security detail. Ahead, though she couldn't see it, Dante's vehicle led them through streets that were just beginning to wake with the approach of dawn. The city slid past in a blur of streetlights and shuttered storefronts. They moved quickly, but not recklessly, Vincent navigating with the confidence of someone who knew every route and alternate path. Harper watched the buildings change as they traveled, the hospital district giving way to commercial zones, then industrial areas that grew progressively more weathered and isolated. "How much longer?" she asked, after what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes. 7 minutes? Vincent called from the front. "Traffic's light. We're making good time." 7 minutes. Harper forced herself to breathe, to focus on the monitors rather than the 1,000 scenarios running through her mind. Noah's fever hadn't spiked. His heart rate remained steady. The swelling Dr. Chen had warned about hadn't manifested in any of the subtle signs the doctors had told her to watch for. "Miss Lane," Dr. Chen's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "I want to prepare you for what comes next. When we arrive at the facility, we're going to move quickly. We'll transfer Noah to a dedicated ICU room that's already been prepped. Once he's settled, we'll run another full workup, blood panels, CT scan to check the cerebral swelling, possibly another lumbar puncture depending on his response to the antibiotics." "Another spinal tap?" Harper's stomach clenched. "He just had one. And we need to see how the infection is responding. The cultures from the first tap take time to grow, but we can check cell counts, protein levels, glucose. It gives us a real-time picture of what's happening in his brain. Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. I know it's hard to watch, but we need the information. Harper swallowed hard, nodding. Outside, the buildings had given way to a stretch of waterfront property, the dawn light catching on the harbor beyond. Chain-link fences and industrial structures lined the route, interspersed with empty lots and shuttered warehouses that spoke of a district in transition. Then Vincent turned through an unmarked gate, and everything changed. The facility rose before them like something transplanted from a different world, a gleaming glass and steel structure that looked nothing like the decaying industrial landscape surrounding it. Security barriers lifted automatically as their convoy approached. Men in suits that didn't quite conceal shoulder holsters tracked their progress from strategic positions. This wasn't a hospital. This was a fortress that happened to have medical equipment. The ambulance pulled into a covered bay, the doors already closing behind them before the vehicle fully stopped. Harper's pulse kicked up as the rear doors opened, revealing Dante and a full medical team waiting to receive them. "Smooth transport," Dr. Reeves reported, already unhooking monitors to transfer them to the waiting gurney. No changes in status. The transfer happened with practiced efficiency. Noah moving from ambulance to gurney without waking. Harper climbed out, her legs unsteady after the tension of the ride, and found herself in what looked like a private emergency department. The space was immaculate, equipped with technology that made St. Catherine's look dated, and staffed by people who moved with the calm competence of professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. "This way." A nurse gestured toward a corridor and the entire group began moving. Noah's gurney surrounded by medical staff, Harper keeping pace beside him, Dante shadowing them all with Vincent close behind. They took an elevator to the third floor, emerging into a pediatric intensive care unit that looked like it belonged in a research hospital rather than a private facility hidden in the industrial district. The rooms were glass-fronted for observation but configured for privacy. Equipment lined the walls, clean and new and ready for use. And everywhere Harper looked, she saw security cameras, reinforced doors, and the subtle signs of a building designed to withstand more than just medical emergencies. "Room 304, the nurse said, leading them to a corner suite that was larger than the room they'd left at St. Catherine's. The monitors here looked more advanced, the bed more sophisticated. A window overlooked the harbor, dawn spreading gold and pink across the water. They transferred Noah again, connecting him to new monitors that beeped to life with reassuring familiarity. Dr. Reeves and Dr. Chen conferred in low voices, reviewing charts on tablets that seemed to have Noah's complete medical history already loaded. A pediatric nurse Harper hadn't met began a full assessment, checking vitals and IV lines with gentle efficiency. "Ms. Lane," Dr. Chen turned to her. "We'd like to run that CT scan now while Noah's still sedated. It's easier than trying to keep a 5-year-old completely still when he's awake." Harper looked at Noah's peaceful face, hating that he had to endure more tests, more procedures, more invasions of his small body. But she nodded, because what else could she do? "I'll stay with him," Dr. Reeves said. "The imaging suite is just down the hall. We'll be back in 20 minutes. They wheeled Noah out again, Dr. Reeves and 2 nurses accompanying him. The room felt enormous in his absence, too quiet despite the soft hum of equipment. Harper sank into the chair beside the now empty bed, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. "You should eat something." Dante's voice came from the doorway where he'd been standing silently. "There's a kitchen on this floor. Real food, not vending machine options." "I'm not hungry." "You haven't eaten since yesterday afternoon. You're running on adrenaline and fear, and neither of those is sustainable." Harper looked up at him, seeing the same exhaustion in his face. "When did you eat last?" "Yesterday morning." A faint, humorless smile touched his mouth. "So I'm a hypocrite. But I'm a hypocrite who's right. You need to take care of yourself if you're going to be here for Noah." He was right, and she resented it. But more than that, she resented how easily he'd slipped back into reading her, knowing what she needed before she acknowledged it herself. 5 years hadn't erased the patterns of their marriage. It had just buried them under layers of hurt and distance. "Fine." She stood, her muscles protesting the movement. "But I want to see the imaging suite first. I want to know where they took him." Dante nodded and led her down the corridor. The facility was quieter than a regular hospital, the rooms they passed mostly empty. This was a place built for capacity that it rarely reached, a resource held in reserve for emergencies exactly like this one. The imaging suite was visible through observation windows, Noah's small form positioned on the CT scanner's table with careful precision. Dr. Reeves stood at the control panel, watching monitors as the machine hummed to life. Harper pressed her hand to the glass, watching the scanner slide over her son's head, mapping the battlefield inside his skull, where infection and antibiotics waged invisible war. "The swelling is the wild card," Dante said quietly beside her. "Everything else we can manage. But if his brain swells too much, if the pressure builds faster than the medication can work, don't." Harper's voice came out sharp. "Don't say it. Don't make it real by putting it into words." "It's already real, Harper. Saying it or not saying it doesn't change what's happening in there." She knew he was right, but she couldn't acknowledge it. Couldn't look directly at the possibility that Noah might not survive this, that the fever and the infection and the swelling might win despite everything medicine and money could throw at it. If she looked at that possibility directly, she'd shatter, and she couldn't afford to shatter. Not yet. Not while Noah still needed her. The scan completed. Dr. Reeves made notes on his tablet, his expression giving nothing away. They wheeled Noah back to his room, transferring him to the bed with the same gentle efficiency as before. The monitors resumed their beeping, painting vital signs and glowing numbers that meant everything and nothing. "The scan looks acceptable," Dr. Reeves said, reviewing images on a large monitor mounted to the wall. "There's definitely swelling, but it's not worse than I expected at this stage. The infection is putting pressure on the meninges, the protective layers around the brain, but we're not seeing herniation or dangerous midline shift. That's good news." "What's bad news?" Harper asked, because there was always bad news. "The bacterial load is still significant. His body is fighting hard, but this is the kind of infection that can turn on a dime. The next 6 to 8 hours are critical. If the antibiotics can knock down the bacterial count and the swelling stabilizes or improves, we'll be in much better shape. If either gets worse," he paused, choosing words carefully, "we'll need to make decisions about more aggressive interventions." "Surgery," Dante said flatly. "Possibly. Or we might try hyperosmolar therapy first, IV medications that pull fluid from the brain tissue. It's less invasive, but also less predictable. We'd need to see how Noah responds." Dr. Chen entered, having reviewed lab results that had apparently been rushed through the facility's own laboratory. "White count is down slightly from the admission labs," she reported. "That's encouraging. The antibiotics are working, but his inflammatory markers are still quite elevated, which correlates with the swelling we're seeing on imaging." The medical jargon washed over Harper in waves, cell counts and protein levels and measurements that reduced her son's suffering to data points on a screen. She understood the basics, could follow the logic of what they were telling her, but the clinical distance between information and emotion felt impossibly vast. "Can I stay with him?" she asked. "While we wait for these critical hours to pass?" "Of course," Dr. Reeves said. "We'll be monitoring him constantly, but there's no reason you can't be here. In fact, I'd recommend it. Children do better when parents are present, even if they're not conscious. They know you're there on some level." Harper settled back into the chair beside Noah's bed, taking his small hand in hers. His skin was still too hot, the fever persistent despite the medications flowing through his IV. She studied his face, memorizing features she'd seen every day for 5 years but which suddenly felt precious and temporary. The way his eyelashes fanned against his flushed cheeks, the small scar on his chin from when he'd fallen off a swing set, the cowlick that made his hair stick up no matter how much she tried to smooth it down. "I should go," Dante said from the doorway. "Check the perimeter, make sure security is maintaining protocol." "You mean make sure no one followed us here?" "That too." He hesitated, and Harper saw something complicated move across his face. "When he wakes up, if he asks for me, I'll tell him you'll be back." Harper met his eyes. "But Dante, I need you to understand something. That conversation we didn't finish at the hospital about custody and rights and who gets to make decisions, we're going to have that conversation. Soon. Because I won't let you use this crisis to establish some kind of authority over Noah's life that you didn't earn." "Earn." Dante's voice went cold. "I'm his father. Biology doesn't make you a parent. Being there makes you a parent. Showing up for the hard moments, the boring moments, the 3 a.m. fevers, And the scraped knees and the homework struggles, that's what makes you a parent. You've been here for 6 hours of crisis. I've been here for 5 years of everything else. Because you chose to shut me out. You don't get credit for doing it alone when you made sure I couldn't do it with you. The argument was circular, well-worn despite being only hours old. They were both right and both wrong, both justified and both culpable. Harper didn't have the energy to parse it further. "Just go check your security," she said tiredly. "Make sure your enemies aren't going to burst through the doors. That's what you're good at, isn't it? Managing threats and controlling variables?" Dante flinched, the barb landing. "I'll be back in an hour. If anything changes, you'll be notified immediately, I'm sure." Harper gestured to the cameras positioned throughout the room. "You're watching anyway." He didn't deny it. After a long moment, he turned and left, Vincent falling into step behind him. The door closed with a soft click, sealing Harper alone with her sleeping son and the steady beep of monitors tracking the war being waged inside his small body. Dr. Chen remained, settling into a chair near the monitoring station. "I'll be here through the morning shift," she said. "Dr. Reeves is taking a break, but he'll be back in a few hours. You're not alone, Miss Lane." Harper nodded, grateful for the presence even if it came wrapped in the strange reality of Dante's private medical fortress. She turned her attention back to Noah, willing the antibiotics to work faster, the swelling to subside, the fever to break, willing her son to be strong enough to survive this assault on his small system. The hours crept past with agonizing slowness. Nurses came and went, checking vitals and adjusting IV drips. Dr. Chen made notes on her tablet, occasionally conferring with unseen colleagues via video chat. Harper sat Vigil, holding Noah's hand, whispering stories and promises into the antiseptic air. She told him about the dinosaur exhibit they'd been planning to visit next month, about the treehouse his daycare was building, about all the things they'd do together when he was better, painting futures in words to convince herself those futures would actually arrive. Somewhere around 7 a.m., Noah stirred. His eyelids fluttered, and a small sound escaped his lips. Harper leaned forward, hope and fear tangling in her chest. "Noah? Baby, can you hear me?" His eyes opened slowly, still glazed with fever and medication, but more focused than before. "Mama? I'm right here, sweetheart." His gaze moved around the unfamiliar room, confusion creasing his small forehead. "Where are we?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere the doctors can help you feel better." "It still hurts." His hand moved weakly toward his head. "Everything hurts." Dr. Chen was already moving, checking his pupils with a penlight, asking him simple questions. "Do you know your name? How old are you? Can you tell me what your favorite dinosaur is?" Noah answered each question, his voice small but clear. "Velociraptor." 5. Noah Valenti. The last answer made Harper's chest tighten, this new reality where her son claimed both their names without understanding what that meant. "Good," Dr. Chen said, her professional mask concealing whatever she thought of his responses. "You're doing great, Noah. We're going to give you something for the pain, okay?" She administered medication, and within minutes, Noah's features relaxed slightly. But his eyes remained open, tracking movement in the room with the wary assessment of a child who'd been through too much in too short a time. "Where's the tall man?" he asked suddenly. "The one with mean eyes?" "Your father," Harper said carefully, "had to check on some things, but he'll be back soon." Does he really like dinosaurs, or was he just saying that? The question was so quintessentially 5-year-old that Harper felt tears prick her eyes. In the middle of illness and danger and upheaval, Noah wanted to know if Dante's interest in velociraptors was genuine. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I think he wants to like what you like. I think he wants to know you." Noah considered this with the seriousness he brought to important matters. "Okay, but he has to learn about the Jurassic period first. You can't really understand velociraptors without knowing about the Jurassic period." "I'll make sure he knows that's the requirement." Satisfied, Noah let his eyes drift closed again. But this time, the sleep looked more natural, less like unconsciousness enforced by sedation. His breathing evened out, and the monitors showed subtle improvements. Temperature down a fraction of a degree, heart rate slightly slower, the incremental signs that his body might be winning its battle. Dr. Chen caught Harper's eye, allowing herself a small smile. "This is good. He's more alert, more oriented. The antibiotics are working. Hope unfurled in Harper's chest, tentative but real. Maybe they'd caught it in time. Maybe the transport had been worth the risk. Maybe Noah would survive this, and they could figure out what came next without the specter of his death hanging over every decision. The door opened. Dante entered, his attention immediately fixing on Noah's sleeping form, tracking the changes since he'd left an hour ago. He woke up? Briefly. Asked about you, actually. Harper watched Dante's expression shift, something raw and unguarded flickering across his features before his control reasserted itself. He wants to make sure you learn about the Jurassic period before he teaches you about velociraptors. The Jurassic period. Dante moved closer to the bed, his hand hovering over Noah's as if unsure whether he had the right to touch. I'll study, take notes, pass whatever test he administers. It's not a test. He just wants... Harper stopped, searching for the right words. He wants to share the things that matter to him. That's how children love. They give you their dinosaurs and their weird facts and their trust, and they hope you'll care about it as much as they do. Dante's hand finally settled on Noah's, large and careful and achingly gentle. Then I'll care. Whatever he needs to share, whatever matters to him, I'll care. The promise hung in the air between them, weighty with implication. Harper studied Dante's face, seeing past the control to the fear beneath. He was terrified of failing at this, of being rejected by a son he'd just discovered, of proving that Harper had been right to keep them apart. The fever's down slightly, she said, offering information like an olive branch. Dr. Chen thinks he's improving. But we're not out of danger yet. No. The next few hours still matter, but we're moving in the right direction. They stood on opposite sides of Noah's bed, connected by the small body between them and the impossible choices that had brought them to this moment. Outside, dawn had fully broken, sunlight streaming through the window to paint golden patterns across the hospital room that wasn't quite a hospital room. And somewhere beyond these walls, enemies were calculating and security teams were watching, and the world they'd tried to escape was closing in. But for now, Noah was stable. For now, they had time, and that would have to be enough. The improvement lasted exactly 4 hours. Harper had just allowed herself to believe they might actually be winning when Noah's monitors began their urgent chorus. The steady beeping that had become background noise accelerated into alarm, numbers flashing red on screens that Dr. Chen suddenly appeared beside with the speed of someone who'd been watching, waiting, anticipating exactly this moment. Temperature spiking, Doctor, Chen announced, her hands already moving across the monitoring equipment. 104.8 and climbing. Heart rate elevated to 142. He's seizing. Harper watched in horror as Noah's small body went rigid, his limbs jerking in rhythms that looked nothing like her son and everything like a medical emergency spiraling beyond control. The gentle child who'd asked about dinosaurs and Jurassic periods had disappeared into convulsions that made his IV lines strain against their anchors. Get Dr. Reeves. Doctor. Chen snapped to someone Harper couldn't see through the sudden press of medical personnel flooding the room. And prep the OR. We're out of time. Dante's hand closed on Harper's arm, pulling her back as nurses swarmed Noah's bed. She wanted to fight him, to stay close, but his grip was iron and the medical team needed space to work. She caught glimpses between moving bodies, someone administering medication to stop the seizure, another adjusting the IV drip, Doctor. Chen barking orders in the calm urgency of crisis management. What's happening? Harper's voice came out strangled. He was getting better. The infection accelerated, Dr. Chen said without looking away from her patient. Sometimes bacteria fight back before they die. The swelling we were monitoring just went critical. The seizure stopped as suddenly as it had started, medication forcing Noah's body back into stillness. But the monitors showed what Harper's eyes couldn't see, pressure building inside her son's skull. Infection squeezing his brain into spaces too small to contain it. Dr. Reeves burst through the door, already reading vitals from a tablet someone had thrust into his hands. Talk to me. Grand mal's seizure, duration 90 seconds, temperature 105.1 despite aggressive cooling measures. Latest CT shows significant progression of cerebral edema. IC-P is approaching critical threshold. Doctor. Chen's clinical recitation painted a picture of Noah's small body losing its battle. We need to decompress, now. Dr. Reeves turned to Harper, his expression grave. Miss Lane, Noah's brain is swelling faster than medication can control it. If we don't relieve the pressure surgically, he'll have permanent brain damage or worse. We need your consent to operate. The words hit like physical blows. Surgery. Brain surgery. On her 5-year-old son, whose biggest worry yesterday had been whether his plastic velociraptor could sleep in his bed. What kind of surgery? Dante's voice cut through Harper's paralysis, demanding specifics even as the world tilted beneath them. External ventricular drain, Dr. Reeves said. We'll drill a small hole in his skull and place a catheter to drain cerebrospinal fluid, relieving the pressure. It's a standard procedure for cases like this, but it comes with risks: infection, bleeding, damage to brain tissue if placement isn't perfect. And if we don't do it, Harper heard herself ask, though she already knew the answer, the pressure will continue building. Best case, he survives with severe neurological deficits. Worst case, Dr. Reeves stopped, the unspoken conclusion hanging heavy in the antiseptic air. Harper looked at Noah, unconscious now from the post-seizure medication, his face still flushed with fever that refused to break. She thought about the conversation they'd had just hours ago, about choices and consequences, and impossible decisions made in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Do it, she said. Whatever he needs, just save him. Dr. Reeves nodded and turned to his team. Or3 is prepped. Let's move. They were already mobilizing, unhooking monitors to transfer to portable units, checking IV lines, transforming Noah's bed into a mobile unit. Harper tried to follow, but Dr. Chen intercepted her gently. You can't come into the OR, the doctor said. But there's an observation gallery. You can watch from there. Watch. Watch strangers cut into her son's skull. Watch them drill through bone to reach the swollen tissue beneath. Watch and do nothing while they fought to save a life that had started inside her body 5 years ago. Dante's hand found hers, his fingers threading through hers with surprising gentleness. We'll watch together. They followed the medical team through corridors that Harper had barely noticed during their arrival. The facility revealed itself in fragments: another ICU wing, a recovery area, administrative offices sealed behind reinforced doors, and at the end of a hallway lined with what looked like expensive art, a surgical suite that could have belonged to any major hospital, if not for the armed guards positioned at strategic intervals. The observation gallery overlooked Operating Room 3 through floor-to-ceiling windows designed for teaching and oversight. Harper and Dante entered to find Vincent already there, his phone pressed to his ear, having what sounded like an intense conversation in rapid Italian. He ended the call as they approached. Perimeter is secure, Vincent reported to Dante, then seemed to catch himself, glancing at Harper. Ms. Lane, I'm sorry. This isn't the time for business. Everything is business with him, Harper said, but the words lacked heat. She was too focused on the scene unfolding below, where medical staff were positioning Noah on the operating table with careful precision. A surgical nurse began prepping Noah's head, shaving a small section of his dark hair. Harper's hand flew to her mouth, the visceral reality of what was about to happen suddenly overwhelming. They were going to cut into her baby's skull, were going to drill through bone and insert foreign objects into his brain. And she had consented to this, had authorized them to do it, because the alternative was watching him die. Dante's arm came around her shoulders, solid and warm. She should have shrugged him off, maintained the distance she'd fought so hard to preserve. Instead, she leaned into him, needing the support even as she hated needing it. He's strong, Dante said quietly. He survived 5 years with you, growing up safe and loved. He'll survive this too. You don't know that. Nobody knows that. No, but I choose to believe it anyway, because the alternative, his voice roughened, I can't consider the alternative. Not for a son I just met. Not when I haven't had the chance to teach him about the Jurassic period. The absurdity of the statement pulled a sound from Harper that was half sob, half laugh. Below them, the surgical team moved with choreographed efficiency. Dr. Reeves positioned himself at the head of the table, already examining the CT scans displayed on monitors positioned around the operating theater. An anesthesiologist made final adjustments to equipment that would keep Noah unconscious and breathing while strangers invaded his small body. We're ready to begin, Doctor. Reeves's voice came through speakers mounted in the observation gallery, making the initial incision. Harper forced herself to watch as the surgeon's hands moved with steady precision, cutting through skin to expose the skull beneath. Blood bloomed against white surgical drapes, immediately suctioned away by an assisting nurse. The clinical efficiency of it all made it seem almost routine, as if this happened every day and wasn't the most terrifying moment of Harper's entire existence. "Drilling now," Dr. Reeves narrated, apparently aware of their presence in the gallery. The drill's high-pitched whine penetrated even the soundproofed glass, making Harper flinch. "I can't watch this," she whispered, but she didn't look away. Couldn't look away. This was her son, her responsibility, her choice. If he had to endure it, she could witness it. Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. "Vincent, handle it." "What is it?" Harper asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Vincent moved to Dante's other side, keeping his voice low. "The Castellanos know we moved. They're putting pressure on our street operations, looking for leverage." "Now?" Harper turned on him, fury cutting through her fear. "Your enemies are making moves while your son is in surgery?" "They don't care about timing," Dante said flatly. "They care about advantage. Vincent, tell our people to hold position. No escalation. We give them nothing to work with." "They're not going to like that." "I don't care what they like. Tell them to stand down or answer to me directly." Vincent nodded and moved away, phone already at his ear. Harper stared at Dante, seeing the tension in his jaw, the way his hand had curled into a fist. "This is your world," she said quietly. "This is what I was protecting Noah from. Enemies who don't care that a 5-year-old is fighting for his life. People who see his crisis as an opportunity." "You're right." Dante met her eyes, not flinching from the accusation. "This is my world, and you did protect him from it for 5 years. But Harper, he's in it now whether we like it or not. The question isn't whether we can keep him isolated from it. We can't. The question is whether we can keep him safe within it. That's not—" "Catheter is in place," Dr. Reeves announced from below, cutting off Harper's response. "Beginning drainage now. ICP readings are, good. Pressure is dropping. We're getting the response we need." Relief made Harper's knees weak. She gripped the railing in front of the observation window, watching as fluid drained through the catheter they'd placed in Noah's skull. The monitor showed numbers she didn't understand, but which apparently satisfied the surgical team. Dr. Reeves made small adjustments, checking angles and placement with meticulous care. "His vitals are stabilizing," the anesthesiologist reported. "Heart rate coming down. Blood pressure normalizing." "Temperature, bitch?" Dr. Reeves asked. "Still elevated at 104.3, but it's dropped 2 degrees since we relieved the pressure." Harper watched her son's small form on the operating table, his head partially shaved and crowned with medical equipment that looked obscene against his innocent face. This was supposed to be a child worried about dinosaurs and bedtime stories, not a patient requiring emergency neurosurgery because his father's name came with enemies. "The drain will stay in place for several days," Dr. Reeves said, his hands continuing their precise work. "We'll need to monitor the fluid output, watch for signs of infection. But if his response continues like this, he should recover fully." Should, not would. Should, with all its implications of uncertainty and possibility and things that could still go wrong. "Can we—" Harper's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, tried again. "Can we see him when he's out?" "He'll go to the ICU for close monitoring. You can be with him there. But Ms. Lane, understand that he's going to look different. The drain, the bandages, the monitoring equipment. It can be shocking to see on someone you love, especially a child. I don't care how he looks. I just need to be with him." Dr. Reeves nodded, already closing the surgical site with careful sutures. The worst was over. Noah had survived the drilling, the catheter placement, the drainage. He was still sedated, still fighting infection, still dangerously ill. But he was alive, and the pressure that had been threatening to kill him was diminishing with each drop of fluid channeled away from his swollen brain. The surgery concluded with the same efficient choreography it had begun with. They wrapped Noah's head in sterile bandages, secured the external portion of the drainage catheter, and began the process of transitioning him from operating table to recovery bed. Dr. Reeves stripped off his surgical gloves, exchanging quiet words with his team before looking up at the observation gallery. Give us 20 minutes to get him settled in the ICU, he said through the speaker system. Then you can see him. Those 20 minutes stretched into eternity. Harper paced the small gallery, unable to sit, unable to stand still, unable to do anything except count seconds and imagine disasters. Dante made phone calls in low, terse Italian, apparently managing whatever crisis the Castellanos had triggered while also coordinating security updates. Vincent came and went, delivering information that Harper didn't listen to and didn't care about. Finally, a nurse appeared in the gallery doorway. You can see him now. They followed her back through the maze of corridors to the ICU, where Noah had been installed in the same room they'd left hours ago. But the peaceful child who'd asked about his father had been replaced by something that looked more machine than boy. The drainage catheter emerged from bandages wrapped around his head, connected to a collection bag that hung beside the bed. New monitors tracked new measurements. Additional IV lines delivered medications Harper couldn't name. "Oh, baby," Harper whispered, moving to his bedside. His face looked so small above the bandages, his skin still flushed with fever, but less dramatically than before. She wanted to touch him, to smooth his remaining hair, to offer comfort he couldn't feel. But she was terrified of disturbing something vital, of disrupting the delicate balance that was keeping him alive. "You can touch him," Dr. Chen said from her position at the monitoring station. "Gently. Research shows that parental contact helps, even when children are sedated." Harper's hand trembled as she touched Noah's cheek, careful to avoid the bandages and equipment. His skin was warm but not burning. His chest rose and fell with mechanical regularity, assisted by the ventilator they'd placed during surgery to protect his airway. "How long until he wakes up?" she asked. "We're keeping him sedated for at least 24 hours, doctor," Reeves said, entering the room with a tablet displaying what looked like surgical notes. "The brain needs time to recover from the trauma of the procedure. When we do wake him, it'll be gradual. We'll reduce sedation slowly and monitor his neurological response at each stage." "And the infection, the meningitis?" "Still fighting it, but the antibiotics are working, and now that we've relieved the pressure, his body can focus on killing the bacteria instead of trying to prevent his brain from herniating. The next 48 hours will tell us a lot." 48 hours. 2 days of watching and waiting and praying that a 5-year-old's body could withstand assault from infection and medical intervention. 2 days of living in this strange facility while enemies circled and security teams watched, and Harper tried to figure out what came after, assuming there was an after to figure out. Dante positioned himself on Noah's other side, his hand resting near his son's with the same careful uncertainty Harper felt. They stood like that, on opposite sides of a hospital bed, connected by the child between them and separated by everything else. "Vincent says the Castellanos backed off," Dante said quietly. "For now. Word got out about the surgery. Apparently even they have lines they won't cross." "How generous of them." "It's not generosity, it's calculation. Attacking a man while his son is in surgery would unite every other family against them. They can't afford that kind of solidarity among their enemies." Harper looked at him across Noah's unconscious form. "This is the world you're offering him, where even his medical crises have to be calculated for their strategic implications, where people decide whether to attack based on optics rather than basic human decency." "I'm not offering him anything. He's already in it. I didn't make that choice. You did, the moment you used my name in that emergency room." Dante's voice remained level, but Harper heard the edge beneath it. "You want to blame me for the world I built? Fine. I deserve that. But don't pretend you didn't bring him into it yourself when you had no other option." The accusation stung because it was true. Harper had run for 5 years, had built walls of distance and anonymity, had convinced herself that hiding was the same as safety. But when Noah's fever spiked and his consciousness slipped, she'd made the same calculation Dante would have made. Survival over secrecy, immediate crisis over long-term consequence. "I hate that you're right," she said quietly. "I hate that I am too." Dante's hand finally settled on Noah's, his large fingers dwarfing the small ones they covered. "But Harper, we can't change it now. We can only decide what happens next. What happens next is he gets better. That's the only thing that matters." "That's the only thing that matters right now," Dante corrected. "But when he's stable, when the immediate crisis passes, we're going to have to talk about the future. About custody and safety and how we raise a child in a world that wants to use him against me. We raise him far away from you. That's how." "Is it?" Dante's eyes lifted to hers, dark and unreadable. Because that worked so well for the last 5 years? He still ended up in an ICU. He still ended up vulnerable. The only difference is that now I'm here to help protect him instead of being kept in the dark about his existence. Harper wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her. She'd been running on adrenaline and fear for almost 24 hours, and the crash was approaching fast. Her legs felt unsteady. Her vision kept trying to blur at the edges. "You need to rest," Dante said, apparently reading her deterioration. "There's a room down the hall. Actual bed, private bathroom. Vincent can show you." "I'm not leaving Noah." "You're not leaving the facility. You're going to sleep for a few hours so that when he wakes up, you're capable of being the parent he needs." "Don't tell me what Noah needs. I've been his parent for 5 years without your input." "And you've done an excellent job." Dante's voice softened fractionally. "But you're exhausted, and exhausted parents make mistakes. Sleep. I'll stay with him. If anything changes, I'll wake you immediately." Harper looked at Noah, then at Dante, then at the monitors painting their steady reassurance across glowing screens. The logical part of her brain knew Dante was right. She was running on fumes, and eventually those fumes would run out. Better to rest now, while Noah was stable and sedated, than to collapse later when he might actually need her alert and functional. 2 hours, she said, and you wake me if anything changes, anything. I promise. Vincent materialized to guide her to the room Dante had mentioned, which turned out to be more suite than hospital room. Private bedroom, full bathroom, even a small sitting area with a couch and television. It looked like accommodations for visiting executives rather than worried parents, but Harper was too tired to question the luxury. She collapsed onto the bed fully clothed, intending to rest for just a few minutes before returning to Noah's side. But exhaustion pulled her under like a riptide, dragging her into sleep too deep for dreams or nightmares or the fears that had been her constant companion since 2:07 that morning. She woke to Vincent's hand on her shoulder, gentle but insistent. "Ms. Lane, you need to come now." Harper's heart stopped. She was on her feet before fully conscious, terror flooding her system. "What happened? He's awake," Vincent said quickly. "Dr. Reeves started reducing sedation an hour ago. Noah's waking up and he's asking for you." Relief and new fear tangled in Harper's chest. Awake meant alive, meant his brain had survived the surgery. But awake also meant conscious of the drainage catheter in his skull, aware of the pain and confusion and terror of waking in a strange place surrounded by machines. She ran. Through corridors she barely remembered, past security personnel who stepped aside at her approach, following Vincent's steady lead back to the ICU and the room where her son was fighting his way back to consciousness. Dante stood at Noah's bedside, his hand wrapped around their son's, speaking in a low voice that Harper couldn't quite hear. Noah's eyes were open, clouded with medication and confusion, but open, focused on Dante's face with the intensity of someone trying to make sense of a world that had stopped making sense. "Mama!" Noah's voice cracked when he saw her, reaching for her with the hand not connected to Dante. Harper rushed to him, careful of the equipment, wrapping her arms around him as much as the medical setup allowed. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." "My head hurts," Noah whimpered. "What happened to my head?" "You were very sick, sweetheart. The doctors had to do surgery to make you better." Noah's hand moved toward the bandages, but Dante intercepted it gently. "Don't touch, Noah. It needs to stay covered while you heal." "But it hurts." "I know." Harper smoothed the hair that remained, keeping her touch feather-light. "We can give you medicine for the pain. Do you want that?" Noah nodded, then winced at the movement. "Doctor." Reeves appeared beside the bed, smiling down at his young patient with genuine warmth. "Hey there, Noah. I'm Dr. Reeves. How are you feeling?" "My head hurts and I'm tired and I want to go home." Noah's lower lip trembled, tears gathering in his eyes. "Can we go home now?" "Not yet," Dr. Reeves said gently. "You're still getting better, but we can make you more comfortable. Let's start with something for the pain." He administered medication through the IV, and Harper watched Noah's small face gradually relax as pharmaceutical relief took hold. Dr. Reeves conducted a quick neurological exam, checking pupil response, asking simple questions, testing motor function in ways that looked like games but were clearly medical assessment. He's doing remarkably well, Dr. Reeves announced after several minutes. All responses are appropriate. No signs of neurological deficit from the surgery. This is exactly what we want to see. When can the drain come out? Harper asked. Depends on his progress. If the swelling continues to decrease and his intracranial pressure normalizes, possibly in 3 to 4 days. But we're not rushing it. Better to leave it in longer than necessary than to remove it too soon and have the pressure build again. Noah absorbed this conversation with the wide-eyed attention of a child trying to understand adult words that affected him. Is the drain the thing on my head? Yes, Dr. Reeves said. It's helping to drain fluid that was building up and causing pressure, like letting air out of a balloon that got too full. Does it have to stay? For a little while longer, but I promise, when we take it out, you'll feel much better. Noah seemed to accept this, his attention drifting to Dante. You're still here. I'm still here, Dante confirmed. I told you I wanted to learn about the Jurassic period. Can't do that if I leave. A small smile touched Noah's lips despite the pain and confusion. The Jurassic period was 201 to 145 million years ago. That's when the biggest dinosaurs lived. Bigger than velociraptors? Way bigger. Brachiosaurus was like as big as a building. Harper watched them, seeing Dante engage with Noah's dinosaur facts with an intensity that went beyond polite interest. He was memorizing every word, cataloging every detail, treating their son's rambling explanations like vital intelligence. And Noah, despite everything, was warming to him, the wariness from their first meeting giving way to cautious acceptance. I'm hungry, Noah announced suddenly. Can I have pancakes? Dr. Chen laughed from her monitoring station. Not quite yet, but we can try some clear liquids, maybe some juice? Noah made a face but accepted the compromise. A nurse brought apple juice in a cup with a bendy straw, helping him take small sips while Harper supported his head to minimize movement. He managed half the cup before exhaustion caught up with him again. Tired, he mumbled, his eyelids already drooping. Then sleep, Harper said softly. We'll be here when you wake up. Both of you? Harper looked at Dante across their son's bed, seeing the question in his eyes. The same one Noah had asked, but with different implications. Both of them. Together. A family unit instead of warring factions. Both of us, she confirmed, making a promise she wasn't sure she could keep, but which Noah needed to hear. Satisfied, Noah let sleep reclaim him. This time, though, it looked peaceful rather than medically induced. His body relaxed naturally, his breathing even and unassisted. The monitors showed steady improvement, temperature down to 101.8, heart rate normal for a sleeping child, intracranial pressure holding at safe levels. Doctor, Reeves made notes on his tablet, satisfaction evident in his expression. This is very good progress. If he continues like this, we'll be out of the woods much faster than I initially thought. What does that mean for his recovery timeline? Dante asked. Hard to say definitively, but if the infection continues responding to antibiotics and the swelling keeps decreasing, we might be looking at discharge in 7 to 10 days instead of several weeks. 7 to 10 days. Harper tried to imagine that future. Noah well enough to leave this facility, to return to something resembling normal life. But normal had changed fundamentally. There was no going back to their anonymous existence, no pretending that Dante Valenti didn't have a son who enemies would always see as leverage. We need to talk, she said to Dante once the medical team had cleared the room, leaving them alone with their sleeping son. About what happens when he's discharged. I know. Dante's jaw tightened. But not here, not now. Then when? When he's better and you're already making unilateral decisions about where he lives and what school he attends, and how many armed guards shadow him to the playground. Is that what you think I'll do? Isn't it? You've spent your entire adult life controlling situations, managing variables, making sure every angle is covered. Why would Noah be different? Dante was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on their son's bandaged head. Because he's not a situation or a variable, he said finally. He's a person, my person, and I've already missed 5 years of his life because I was exactly the kind of man you're describing. So maybe I can learn to be different. The words hung between them, weighted with hope and history. Harper wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that Dante could choose differently than he had before. But trust required evidence. And the only evidence she had was years of control and violence and choices that had driven her away in the first place. Still, looking at him now, at the gentleness in his hands as he touched Noah's fingers, at the vulnerability in his eyes when he thought no one was watching, she wondered if maybe people could change. If maybe the man who'd terrorized his enemies could also be the father who learned about the Jurassic period because it mattered to his son. "We'll talk," she said finally, "when he's better, when we can think clearly instead of just reacting to crisis." Agreed. They settled into an uneasy truce, both of them watching Noah sleep, both of them aware that the hardest conversations were still ahead. But for now, Noah was alive. He was improving, and that fragile victory would have to be enough to build on. The conversation Harper had been dreading came 3 days later, not in Noah's hospital room, but in a conference space on the facility's 5th floor that looked more like a corporate boardroom than anything medical. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor where morning sun turned the water to hammered gold. A table of polished dark wood dominated the center, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than Harper's monthly rent. Dante stood at the windows when she entered, his shoulders tense beneath the expensive suit he'd changed into, sometime during the 72 hours they'd spent watching Noah's gradual improvement. He turned as the door closed behind her, and Harper saw the exhaustion in his face that matched her own, the toll of sustained crisis wearing through even his formidable control. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the chairs. "I know you don't want to leave Noah, but Dr. Reeves said he'll sleep for at least another hour, and we need to have this conversation before..." "Before what?" Harper remained standing, her arms crossed. "Before you start making decisions for us? Before the Castellanos make another move." Dante's voice went flat. "Vincent's intelligence suggests they're regrouping. The sympathy we got from Noah's surgery is fading. They're looking for new angles, new pressure points. We have maybe a week before things escalate again." Harper moved to the windows, looking out at the city she'd thought could hide them. "So what do you want? Full custody? Supervised visitation for me? Complete control over every aspect of Noah's life? I want a real conversation where we both acknowledge reality instead of fighting over fantasies." Dante joined her at the window, maintaining careful distance. "You can't go back to your old life, Harper. The moment you used my name, that option disappeared. Even if you took Noah and ran again, they'd find you. The Castellanos, the Morettis, the Russos, every family in this city now knows Dante Valenti has a 5-year-old son. That information doesn't get forgotten. So I'm just supposed to accept that Noah grows up surrounded by bodyguards and security protocols? That he can't have a normal childhood because his father built an empire on other people's fear? No." The single word cut through her rising anger. "You're supposed to help me figure out how to give him the best childhood possible, within the constraints we can't change. And Harper, I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to negotiate with me honestly." The word negotiate landed with unexpected weight. Harper turned to face him fully, seeing past the exhaustion to something that looked almost like vulnerability. "What are you offering to negotiate?" Dante moved to the conference table where a leather portfolio waited. He opened it, revealing documents that Harper recognized as legal contracts, the kind with dense text and official seals that meant binding agreements. "Shared legal custody," he said. "Equal decision-making authority on major issues, education, medical care, travel, religious upbringing. You maintain primary physical custody. Noah lives with you, attends school near you, keeps the stability and routine he's used to." Harper's breath caught. She'd expected a fight, expected demands that she move into some compound where Dante could monitor every moment. "What's the catch?" "Security." Dante's finger traced a section of the contract. "Professional protection for both of you. A detail that stays invisible when possible but responds when necessary. And before you argue, this isn't negotiable. The threats are real, Harper. I won't compromise Noah's safety or yours." "Invisible security?" Harper's voice dripped skepticism. "You mean men following us everywhere, watching everything we do?" "I mean professionals who maintain distance until danger appears. Who let Noah play at the park and go to school and have playdates like any other child, but who are there if someone tries to use him against me." Dante pulled out another document. "I've drafted protocols, rules for when they can intervene, limits on surveillance, privacy protections for your home. Vincent helped. He has experience with family security that doesn't suffocate." Harper took the documents, scanning text that was surprisingly specific. Geographic boundaries for active monitoring, restrictions on recording devices in private spaces, requirements for prior notification of security presence, except in genuine emergencies. It read less like imprisonment and more like carefully negotiated protection. "What about weapons?" she asked. "I don't want guns around Noah." "No weapons in his presence except in active threat situations," Dante agreed. "Security carries, but concealed and only deployed if absolutely necessary. That's already in the protocols, Section 4, Paragraph 2. Harper found the section, reading words that suggested Dante had actually thought about this beyond just controlling the situation. He'd considered her concerns, Noah's well-being, the balance between protection and normalcy. "School," she said, looking up from the documents. "I get to choose where he goes. No private academies behind walls and gates. Regular school where he can have regular friends." "Agreed, with one condition. The school has to meet basic security standards. Controlled access, visitor protocols, emergency procedures. But yes, regular school, public or private, your choice, as long as it's safe. And you don't get to veto my choice just because you don't like the security setup. I get to raise concerns. You get final say. But Harper, if I genuinely believe a school is too vulnerable, I'm going to push back. I need you to hear those concerns even if you ultimately disagree." It was more reasonable than Harper had expected, which made her suspicious. "What about your business? Your world? How much of that touches Noah's life?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed the question. "I can't change what I am overnight. The empire I've built. It provides the resources that keep Noah safe, that pay for security and medical care and everything else he needs. But, Harper, I've been thinking about the conversation we had in his hospital room, about the world I'm offering him. And you're right, the life I've lived, the choices I've made, they've created danger that Noah doesn't deserve. So I'm proposing changes." He pulled out another document, this one less formal, covered in handwritten notes. "Transition plan. Over the next 2 years, I move legitimate. Real estate development, legitimate import-export, venture capital. I keep the resources and connections, but lose the activities that create the worst threats." Harper stared at him, searching for the manipulation, the angle, the way this was actually a power play disguised as compromise. "You'd walk away from your empire for a son you just met?" "I'd transform it for a son I want to know." Dante's voice roughened. "For 5 years, I thought you left because I wasn't enough. Because something fundamental in me was broken beyond your ability to love. Then I learned you were pregnant when you ran, that you didn't leave because you stopped loving me. You left because you loved our son more." "Dante, let me finish." He held up a hand. "I've spent 3 days watching Noah wake up, listening to him talk about dinosaurs, seeing him look at me like I'm someone he wants to trust but isn't sure he should. And I realized something. You were right to run. The man I was 5 years ago would have tried to control you both, would have built higher walls instead of examining why you needed to escape in the first place. But I don't want to be that man anymore. I want to be someone Noah can be proud of, someone who doesn't just protect him, but also deserves him." The raw honesty in his voice cracked something in Harper's chest. She'd prepared for battle, for custody fights and legal warfare, and all the ways Dante could use his power to take Noah from her. She hadn't prepared for this. For vulnerability, for self-awareness, for what sounded uncomfortably like genuine change. "Words are easy," she said, fighting to maintain her armor. "Promises cost nothing. How do I know you'll actually follow through?" "You don't." Dante met her eyes steadily. "You have to take a leap of faith. But Harper, I'm offering you something in return. Legal protections, financial security, and most importantly, partnership instead of control. These contracts," he gestured to the documents spread across the table, "they're enforceable. If I violate the terms, you have legal recourse. I'm not asking you to trust my word. I'm asking you to trust a system that holds me accountable." Harper looked at the contracts again, seeing the careful construction of boundaries and protections. Shared custody with her maintaining primary residence. Equal decision-making, but with her input weighted on daily matters. Security protocols that protected without suffocating. Financial support that didn't come with strings attached. What about visitation? She asked. How often do you see him? As often as you'll allow, within reason. I'm proposing scheduled time, weekends, holidays, summer weeks, but also flexibility for the unscheduled moments. If Noah has a school play or a soccer game or just wants to show me something he learned, I want to be available. That's not how custody schedules work. You can't just show up whenever. I know. That's why I'm asking for your cooperation rather than demanding legal rights. I want to be Noah's father, not a visitation schedule. But I understand I have to earn that. So I'm willing to start with whatever structure makes you comfortable and build trust over time. The conference room door opened before Harper could respond. Vincent entered, his expression apologetic but urgent. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. Dante's demeanor shifted instantly, exhaustion replaced by sharp focus. What kind? Castellano's men are at St. Catherine's. They're asking questions about Noah's discharge, what happened to him, where he went. Hospital administration is stonewalling, but it's making them suspicious. Harper's blood went cold. They're at the hospital, the one we left 3 days ago? They expected you to stay there, Vincent explained. When you disappeared, they assumed you'd surface eventually for discharge paperwork or to retrieve belongings. They've been watching. How many men? Dante asked. 4 that we've identified, probably more we haven't. They're getting aggressive, pressuring staff, implying consequences if information doesn't start flowing. Dante's jaw tightened. This ends now. Vincent, arrange a meeting, neutral ground. Tell Castellano I want to talk. Absolutely not. Harper moved between them, her fear transforming into fury. You are not walking into some meeting with the people who tried to use our sick son as leverage. I'm not walking in unprepared, but Harper, this doesn't stop unless we address it directly. They're escalating because they think they can. I need to make it clear they can't. By doing what? Threatening them? Starting a war? By negotiating. Dante's voice remained calm despite the tension radiating from him. By making it clear that going after Noah costs more than any potential gain, that I'm willing to make concessions in other areas, territory, business arrangements, whatever it takes, to establish him as permanently off limits. You'd give up territory for him? I'd give up everything for him. Dante said it simply, as if it were obvious. He's my son. Nothing else matters as much. Vincent cleared his throat. If you're serious about meeting Castellano, we need to move quickly. The longer his men harass hospital staff, the more attention this attracts. We don't want official investigation into Noah's disappearance from St. Catherine's. Dante turned to Harper. I need to handle this. But I won't if you fundamentally object. This is the kind of decision we're supposed to make together now. Harper wanted to object, wanted to keep Dante far away from dangerous meetings with dangerous men. But she also understood the reality they were living in. The Castellanos wouldn't stop unless given a reason to stop. And much as she hated it, Dante was right. Sometimes the only way through danger was directly into it. What guarantees do you have that this meeting doesn't turn violent? She asked. Neutral ground means neutral witnesses, Vincent said. We meet somewhere public enough that nobody tries anything stupid. A restaurant, a hotel lobby, somewhere with cameras and civilians that make violence costly for everyone. And if it goes wrong anyway? Then I have contingencies. Dante's voice went cold. But it won't go wrong. Castellano is a businessman, not a hothead. He'll listen to reason if the terms are right. Harper studied his face, seeing the certainty there. This was Dante in his element, negotiating, managing threats, controlling situations through force of will and strategic thinking. Part of her hated that this was necessary. But another part, the part that had fallen in love with his intensity 6 years ago, recognized the competence beneath the danger. Fine, she said, but I have conditions. You wear a wire so Vincent can monitor. You meet in a place with multiple exits. And you take enough security that you're not vulnerable if things go bad. Agreed. And Dante, Harper moved closer, lowering her voice. You come back. Noah is just starting to trust you. If you get yourself killed playing Mafia politics, you'll prove me right about everything I was running from. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe? Or recognition that her concern went beyond just Noah's well-being. I'll come back. I promise. Vincent was already on his phone, arranging the meeting with the efficiency of someone who'd coordinated this kind of thing before. Harper returned to Noah's room, finding him still asleep, his small chest rising and falling with the easy rhythm of healing. The drainage catheter remained in place, but Dr. Reeves had mentioned possibly removing it tomorrow if the pressure readings continued improving. She settled into the chair beside his bed, taking his hand carefully. "Your father is about to do something dangerous," she whispered to her sleeping son, "and I just gave him permission. I really hope we both survive the consequences." Noah stirred slightly but didn't wake. Harper watched him sleep, thinking about the contracts on the conference room table, about the negotiations ahead, about the impossible choice between the safety of distance and the risk of partnership. 2 hours later, Vincent appeared in the doorway. "It's done," Castellano agreed to meet. 6 o'clock at the Meridian, neutral ground, public hotel, security from both sides. Dante's getting ready now. What exactly is he planning to negotiate? Territory concessions in the warehouse district, exclusive contracts on 3 shipping routes, and a formal declaration that Noah Valenti is off-limits to all families, enforced by mutual agreement. Can Castellano actually enforce that, even if he agrees? If the other families see profit in the arrangement, yes. Dante's offering enough that it's worth their while to respect the boundary. It's not altruism, it's business. Harper nodded slowly, processing the mercenary logic. And if Castellano refuses? Vincent's expression went carefully blank. Then Dante has other options, less pleasant ones. I don't want to know, do I? Probably not. They sat in silence, waiting for 6 o'clock. Noah woke briefly around 4, confused but calmer than previous wakings. Harper fed him ice chips and read to him from a picture book about dinosaurs that had somehow appeared on his bedside table. Dante's doing, she assumed, though he hadn't mentioned it. "Where's the tall man?" Noah asked, his words slightly slurred from lingering sedation. "He had to take care of something. He'll be back later. He promised to learn about the Jurassic period. He can't learn if he's not here. I'll make sure he knows that's important." Noah seemed satisfied with this answer, drifting back to sleep with the book clutched in his small hands. Harper checked the time. 5:30. Dante would be at the Meridian soon, sitting across from a man who'd tried to exploit Noah's medical crisis for leverage. Her phone buzzed. A message from a number she didn't recognize, but the words were clearly Dante's. "Meeting starting. Vincent is monitoring. Everything is fine." She typed back quickly. "It better be. Noah's expecting you to learn about the Jurassic period." The response came almost immediately. "Then I guess I better survive to take notes." Despite everything, Harper found herself smiling. The man who'd terrified her enough to make her run was texting her about dinosaur education requirements while negotiating with dangerous criminals. The cognitive dissonance was almost amusing. 30 minutes passed. 45. Harper divided her attention between Noah and her phone, waiting for updates that didn't come. Vincent had disappeared, presumably to monitor Dante's wire feed from somewhere with better equipment than Noah's hospital room offered. At 6:43, her phone buzzed again. "Deal struck. Castellano agreed to all terms. Noah is formally off limits, enforceable by majority family vote if violated. Heading back now." Relief flooded through Harper so intensely, her hands shook. She texted back, "What did it cost you?" "Less than he's worth. See you in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt eternal. Harper watched Noah sleep, his face peaceful above the bandages that represented how close they'd come to losing him. She thought about the contracts waiting in the conference room, about the future they were tentatively constructing from crisis and compromise. When Dante finally appeared in the doorway, he looked exhausted but satisfied. A small bruise was forming on his jaw that hadn't been there before, suggesting the meeting hadn't been entirely peaceful despite his assurances. "You're bleeding," Harper said, noticing the split lip he'd been trying to hide. Castellano likes to make his points physically sometimes. "It's fine." "That's not fine. That's—" Harper stopped, hearing herself sound like a concerned partner rather than a wary co-parent. "What happened?" "He wanted to test my resolve, pushed me on whether I'd really enforce consequences if he violated the agreement. I pushed back. We reached an understanding." Dante moved to Noah's bedside, his expression softening as he looked at their sleeping son. "How's he doing?" "Better. Woke up asking for you. Said you promised to learn about the Jurassic period." I did promise that. Dante pulled the dinosaur book from Noah's slack grip, studying the cover. Guess I have homework. They stood there in companionable silence, the tension that had defined their previous interactions easing slightly. Harper studied Dante's profile, seeing past the split lip and bruised jaw to the man who'd just negotiated protection for a son he barely knew. The contracts, she said finally. I want to look them over with a lawyer before I sign anything. But Dante, if you actually follow through on what you're promising, the legitimate business transition, the shared custody, the respect for boundaries, I'm willing to try. Not for you, for Noah. I understand. And Harper, I know I have to earn your trust. I know words mean nothing without action. But I want you to know that everything I promised, I meant. Noah deserves better than the man I was. I'm going to work very hard to become the man he needs. We'll see. Harper collected her jacket from the chair. I'm going to get coffee. You can stay with him until I get back. But Dante, if you're serious about learning the Jurassic period, you should know that he tests. He'll ask questions. You can't just skim. A faint smile touched Dante's injured mouth. Noted. I'll study. Harper left them there, father and son, connected by biology and crisis, and the tentative beginning of something that might eventually resemble a relationship. The hallway was quiet. Most of the facility's minimal patient population settled for the evening. She made her way to the small kitchen on the floor, where coffee that was actually good waited instead of the institutional swill most hospitals served. Vincent found her there, pouring her second cup. He told you about the meeting? Some. What did it actually cost him? The territory and shipping routes, how bad is that? Significant. He gave up holdings he spent years building. But Ms. Lane, you should understand something about Dante. He's brilliant at business, ruthless when necessary, capable of things that would horrify most people. But there are lines even he won't cross. Family is one of them. I saw what he did to families who crossed him. That's why I ran. I know, and he knows. But there's a difference between enemy families and his own. When Dante's father died, he promised to never let anyone hurt the people he loved the way his father was hurt. Noah being born, it activated something in him I haven't seen in years. Harper absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man who'd built an empire on fear with the father who'd promised to learn about dinosaurs. Can people really change that fundamentally? I think people can choose to be different, Vincent said carefully. Whether they sustain that choice over time, that's the harder question. But Ms. Lane, I've worked for Dante for 15 years. I've seen him make hard decisions, brutal decisions. I've never seen him look at anything the way he looks at Noah. That kind of love. It has the power to transform, if he lets it. Harper returned to Noah's room to find Dante exactly where she'd left him. The dinosaur book open on his lap, his phone out as he took actual notes about the Jurassic period. He looked up when she entered, something almost sheepish crossing his features. Did you know that velociraptors were actually much smaller than Jurassic Park portrayed them? And they probably had feathers? I did know that, yes. Noah has explained it approximately 200 times. He's going to test me on this, isn't he? Absolutely. He takes his dinosaurs very seriously. Dante returned to his notes with renewed focus, and Harper settled into her chair, sipping coffee and watching this strange domestic scene unfold. Outside, night was falling over the harbor. Inside, her son slept peacefully while his father studied prehistoric time periods with the same intensity he probably brought to criminal negotiations. The next morning brought news that made Harper's heart soar. Dr. Reeves announced that Noah's intracranial pressure had normalized enough to remove the drainage catheter. The procedure was quick, far less invasive than its placement had been, and Noah tolerated it with the remarkable resilience of children. "How does your head feel?" Harper asked, once the bandages had been changed and the catheter was gone. Noah touched the remaining bandages gently. "Still hurts, but better. Less weird." "That's good, sweetheart. You're healing." Over the next 3 days, Noah's improvement accelerated. The fever finally broke completely. The antibiotics finished their work, clearing the infection that had brought them to this crisis. Physical therapy helped him regain strength lost during days of sedation. And through it all, Dante was there, learning about dinosaurs, playing careful games that didn't require too much movement, reading stories, and slowly building a relationship with the son he'd never expected to have. Harper watched their interactions with careful attention, looking for signs of the control she'd run from. But Dante seemed genuinely committed to letting Noah set the pace. When Noah wanted space, Dante gave it. When Noah wanted attention, Dante provided it without overwhelming him. He asked permission before making decisions, deferred to Harper on medical matters, and slowly earned Noah's trust through consistency rather than grand gestures. On the 7th day after surgery, Dr. Reeves delivered the news they'd been waiting for. "I think we can discharge Noah tomorrow. He's exceeded all our recovery benchmarks. The infection is completely cleared. The surgical site is healing beautifully. There's no reason to keep him here longer." "Tomorrow," Harper repeated, the word heavy with implications. Tomorrow meant leaving the protected bubble of the facility. Tomorrow meant returning to the world where Dante's enemies knew about Noah. Tomorrow meant deciding whether the contracts and promises would actually translate into workable reality. That evening, after Noah had fallen asleep, Harper and Dante finally finished the conversation they'd started in the conference room a week ago. They sat in that same space, contracts spread across the table, and worked through every detail with the focus of people who understood that words on paper mattered. Harper's lawyer, hastily hired but thorough, had reviewed everything and suggested modifications. Dante agreed to most of them. They negotiated custody schedules, decision-making protocols, financial arrangements, and security procedures with the kind of detailed attention that transformed abstract promises into enforceable agreements. "Education decisions require mutual consent," Harper's lawyer read from the modified contract. "But in case of deadlock, Harper Lane's preference prevails for children under age 10, after which neutral mediation is required." "Agreed," Dante said. "Medical decisions follow the same pattern, except in emergencies where either parent can authorize necessary treatment." "Agreed." Noah Valenti maintains primary residence with Harper Lane at an address of her choosing, subject to security assessment and reasonable accommodation of protective measures. Harper looked at Dante across the table. "Define reasonable accommodation." "Security can evaluate the property, suggest improvements, install necessary equipment, but they can't demand you move to a fortress. If they say your chosen home isn't defensible, we negotiate solutions that work for both safety and your autonomy. And if we can't agree, then we bring in a neutral security consultant, someone neither of us employs, to make recommendations we both commit to following." The negotiations continued until well past midnight, hammering out details that would govern their co-parenting relationship for years to come. When they finally finished, Harper had a contract that protected Noah's well-being while preserving her authority as his primary parent. Dante had legally enforceable access to his son and the ability to provide protection without demanding control. "There's one more thing," Dante said as they prepared to sign, "something that's not in the contracts because it can't be reduced to legal language." "What?" "I want to apologize for being the kind of man you had to run from, for building a life that made you feel like hiding our son was the only way to keep him safe. I can't change the past, but Harper, I need you to know I understand why you left. And I don't blame you for it." The apology landed unexpectedly, cracking open emotions Harper had been carefully containing. "I'm sorry too," she said quietly, "for not telling you about the pregnancy, for depriving you of 5 years with Noah. I convinced myself I was protecting him, but I also robbed you both of time you can't get back. We both did what we thought we had to do. Now we get to choose differently." They signed the contracts as dawn broke over the harbor, witnessed by Harper's lawyer and Vincent. Legal and binding, the papers transformed crisis-driven promises into enforceable reality. Whatever happened next, they had structure, they had boundaries. They had a framework for building something that might eventually resemble a functional co-parenting relationship. The next morning, Dr. Reeves conducted a final examination and officially discharged Noah. "Keep the incision site clean and dry. Watch for signs of infection. Redness, swelling, fever. He'll need follow-up appointments in 1 week, 2 weeks, and 6 weeks. Any questions?" Harper had 1,000 questions, but none that Dr. Reeves could answer. How did she navigate co-parenting with a former crime boss? How did she balance Noah's need for normalcy with legitimate security concerns? How did she build a life that accommodated Dante's presence without letting him consume everything? "No questions," she said. "Thank you for everything." They left the facility in daylight this time. No urgent transport through pre-dawn streets. Noah wore the clothes Dante had somehow procured, his favorite dinosaur shirt and comfortable pants that hadn't been in Harper's hasty hospital bag. He walked between them, holding both their hands, chattering about wanting to see his plastic velociraptor and sleep in his own bed and tell his friends about the adventure he'd had. The car Dante had arranged was equipped with car seats that met current safety standards and enough security features to probably withstand a small explosion. But it looked normal from the outside, just a family vehicle, nothing that screamed protection detail. Vincent drove, with two security cars maintaining invisible distance ahead and behind. They headed toward the address Harper had finally given Dante, the small apartment in a decent neighborhood where she and Noah had lived for the past 3 years. "It's not much," Harper warned as they approached. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, no fancy security setup. "It's where Noah feels safe," Dante said. "That makes it perfect." The apartment was exactly as she'd left it 8 days ago when Noah's fever had spiked. Dishes in the sink, Noah's toys scattered across the living room floor, the blue velociraptor waiting on his pillow exactly where he'd left it. Noah ran to his room with a delighted cry, emerging seconds later clutching his beloved dinosaur. "He's here! I told you he'd wait for me!" I never doubted it," Harper said, smiling despite her exhaustion. Dante stood in the middle of her modest living room, looking profoundly out of place in his expensive suit. Harper saw him taking in the second-hand furniture, the cheerful clutter, the life she'd built without him. For a moment she worried he'd find it lacking, would judge her for the modest circumstances she'd chosen to maintain their invisibility. Instead, he said quietly, "You built a good home for him. Thank you for that." The genuine gratitude in his voice made Harper's throat tight. "I did what I could." "You did more than that. You kept him safe and happy and loved. That's everything." A knock on the door interrupted them. Harper tensed, but Dante gestured for her to relax. "Security team, they need to do an assessment, install basic monitoring equipment. It won't take long." Harper nodded, watching as 3 professionals entered and began efficiently surveying her apartment. They installed cameras at entry points, upgraded her locks, placed motion sensors in strategic locations. Within an hour, they transformed her home into something significantly more secure without making it feel like a fortress. "The system connects to our monitoring center," the team leader explained to Harper, "but you have full control. You can turn it off whenever you want privacy. The cameras only activate if the perimeter is breached. And per Mr. Valenti's instructions, nothing records inside except in the event of an actual break-in." Harper appreciated the careful respect for her autonomy, the adherence to the privacy protections they'd negotiated in the contracts. "Thank you." The team left. Vincent departed shortly after, leaving Harper and Dante alone with Noah, who was showing his plastic dinosaur collection to Dante with the seriousness of a museum curator. "This one is a pteranodon, which technically isn't a dinosaur because it's a flying reptile, and this one is a triceratops from the Cretaceous period, which came after the Jurassic period. And this one..." Dante listened with focused attention, asking questions that demonstrated he'd actually studied the material from the dinosaur book. Noah's face lit up with each answer, his trust in his father growing visibly. Harper watched them together and felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't the reunion she'd feared, Dante swooping in to claim what he'd missed, disrupting the life she'd built, overwhelming Noah with intensity. This was gentler, more careful, built on respect for boundaries and recognition that trust had to be earned. "I should go," Dante said eventually, checking his watch. "Let you both settle in properly. But Noah, I was wondering, would it be okay if I came back on Saturday? Maybe we could go to that dinosaur exhibit at the museum your mom mentioned." Noah looked to Harper for permission, and she nodded. "If you want to, sweetheart. Can we see the T-Rex skeleton? It's really big." "Then we'll definitely see the T-Rex skeleton," Dante promised. "I'll pick you up at 10? They worked out the details. Dante would come to the apartment, spend the day with Noah at the museum, and lunch afterward, return him by 5. Their first official custody exchange, governed by the contracts they'd signed but softened by the relationship slowly building between them. At the door, Dante paused. "Harper, I know this is strange. I know we're figuring it out as we go. But thank you for giving me this chance. Thank Noah. He's the one who decided you were worth knowing. I won't let him down. See that you don't. Because if you do, contracts or not, I'll make sure you regret it. Dante's smile was faint but genuine. I wouldn't expect anything less. He left, and Harper locked the door behind him, engaging the new security system. She found Noah in his room, the blue velociraptor clutched close, his eyes already drooping with exhaustion, despite it being only early afternoon. Mama? Is he really going to come back on Saturday? He really is, baby. And he's really my daddy? For keeps? Harper settled beside him on the small bed, brushing his hair back from the healing incision site. Yes, sweetheart. For keeps. Good. Noah yawned, burrowing into his familiar pillow. I like him. He's not as scary as his eyes make him look. No, Harper agreed softly. I don't think he is. She stayed until Noah fell asleep, then moved to the living room where her phone waited with a dozen messages from concerned friends who'd covered for her at work, managed her absence, worried about the medical emergency that had consumed the past week and a half. She answered them carefully, explaining that Noah was recovering from meningitis, that he'd needed surgery but was healing well, that they were home now, and okay. She didn't mention Dante, didn't explain about custody agreements or security installations or the fundamental shift in their lives. That would come later, when she'd figured out how to explain it to herself. Saturday arrived with the inevitability of tides. Harper spent the morning in a state of controlled anxiety, cleaning an already clean apartment, double-checking Noah's bag, trying not to hover as her son got ready to spend the day with a father he barely knew. Dante arrived exactly at 10, dressed more casually than Harper had ever seen him, jeans and a dark sweater that somehow still managed to look expensive. He greeted Noah with easy warmth, discussing their museum plans with genuine enthusiasm. Remember, he needs to eat lunch by noon or he gets cranky, Harper said, handing over the bag she'd packed. He's still on antibiotics, 1 dose at lunch, which I've included, and if he seems tired or his head hurts, I'll bring him home immediately, Dante finished. Harper, I've got this. I promise. She watched them leave together, Noah's small hand in Dante's large one, chattering about the exhibits he wanted to see. The security detail was there but invisible, maintaining the distance they'd agreed on. To any observer, it looked like a normal father and son heading out for a normal day. Harper spent the afternoon trying to focus on work, on the transcription project she'd neglected during Noah's crisis. But her attention kept drifting to her phone, waiting for updates that didn't come because no news meant everything was fine. At 4:30, her phone rang. Hey, Dante's voice came through, warm and slightly breathless. We're on our way back, but we made a stop. Is it okay if we're 15 minutes late? What kind of stop? The museum gift shop. Noah found a book about the Cretaceous period. I want to get it for him, but I figured I should check with you first about gifts. The fact that he'd asked, rather than just buying whatever Noah wanted, spoke to their negotiations about presenting a united front. The book is fine, but Dante, you can't buy him everything he looks at twice. I know, this one is special. He's been talking about it the whole way home, something about how the Cretaceous period doesn't get enough attention compared to the Jurassic. Despite her anxiety, Harper smiled. Get the book, but let's establish some guidelines for future gifts. Agreed. See you soon. They arrived 20 minutes later, Noah bursting through the door with excitement, clutching his new book and a small plastic stegosaurus that Dante had also apparently approved. Mama, we saw the T-Rex and it was huge, and Dante said it lived in the Cretaceous period, which is when the asteroids came and killed all the dinosaurs, and we had lunch and I took my medicine and look at my new book. The words tumbled out in a rush. Noah's happiness so pure and uncomplicated that Harper felt tears prick her eyes. This was what she'd wanted for him, joy, normalcy, the simple pleasure of a day with his father. No crisis, no danger, just a 5-year-old sharing his passions with someone who actually cared. Sounds like you had a great time, she said, catching Dante's eye over Noah's head. We did, Dante confirmed. He's an excellent museum guide, very educational. They exchanged Noah like they'd practiced, Dante updating Harper on how he'd felt throughout the day, Harper confirming the evening routine, both of them navigating the handoff with careful respect for each other's roles. It felt almost normal, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. After Dante left, Noah talked nonstop through dinner, bath, and bedtime stories about everything he'd seen and learned. He fell asleep clutching both his blue velociraptor and the new Stegosaurus, the Cretaceous period book on his nightstand for tomorrow's reading. Harper stood in his doorway, watching him sleep, and allowed herself to acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding. This might actually work. The co-parenting, the shared custody, the carefully negotiated boundaries, all of it might actually create something sustainable for Noah. The weeks that followed established patterns that slowly felt less strange. Dante's scheduled visits became routine. The security detail maintained their invisible presence. Noah's follow-up appointments showed continued healing, and Harper began to relax, to trust that the structure they'd built would hold. 3 months after Noah's discharge, Dr. Reeves delivered the final good news. Complete recovery, no neurological deficits, no lasting effects from the infection or the surgery. He's a healthy, normal 5-year-old who happens to have a really interesting scar story. So we're done? No more appointments? One more in 6 months, just to confirm everything stays stable. But yes, Harper, you're done. He beat it. Harper cried in the parking lot, letting out 3 months of held tension. Noah, buckled safely in his car seat, asked why she was sad. I'm not sad, baby. I'm relieved. You're completely better. I know. Can we get ice cream to celebrate? She took him for ice cream, then called Dante to share the news. He arrived at the ice cream shop 20 minutes later, scooping Noah into a careful hug that the boy returned enthusiastically. Completely recovered, Harper confirmed. Dr. Reeves says he's perfect. Of course he is. Dante's hand found Noah's head, touching the spot where the incision had healed to an almost invisible line beneath his hair. He's strong, like his mother. The compliment was unexpected, genuine. Harper felt something shift between them, not romance, not yet, but the foundation for something that might eventually become partnership. They were learning to trust each other, to communicate, to make decisions together for Noah's benefit. 6 months after the crisis that had brought them all together, Harper and Dante met for coffee while Noah was at school. They'd been doing this monthly, checking in, discussing Noah's progress, adjusting custody arrangements as needed. But this time Dante brought something extra. I wanted to show you this. He pulled out documents marked with official seals. The last of my illegitimate operations just transferred to legitimate ownership. Real estate development, all legal, all clean. I'm out, Harper. Completely out of the life you were running from. Harper studied the papers, seeing proof that Dante had actually followed through on his promise. This must have cost you. Less than I gained. Noah trusts me now. That's worth more than any empire. And your enemies, the Castellanos and the others? Still out there, but less interested now that I'm not a competitor. The agreement about Noah has held. Nobody's tested it, and I don't think they will. There's no profit in antagonizing a man who stepped back from the game. Harper absorbed this, seeing the future taking shape. Not the future she'd imagined when she ran 5 years ago, but perhaps a better one, built on honesty and boundaries, and the kind of change that only crisis could catalyze. Noah's been asking questions, she said carefully, about why we don't all live together like other families. I've been telling him that we have a different arrangement, but he's starting to wonder if that's just a nice way of saying we don't like each other. Dante was quiet for a moment. What do you want to tell him? I want to tell him the truth, that his parents are learning to be friends, that we're building something new that works for our family, even if it looks different from other families. But Dante, I also need to be honest with you. I don't know if we can ever be more than co-parents. There's too much history, too much hurt. I know, and I'm not asking for more than you can give. If co-parents and friends is what we become, that's enough. Noah has 2 parents who love him and who can work together for his well-being. That's more than a lot of kids have. It was the right answer, mature and selfless. Harper found herself studying Dante's face, seeing the changes 3 months had wrought. Less tension in his shoulders, fewer shadows in his eyes. The look of a man who'd chosen to become someone different and was discovering that the choice suited him. Maybe we start with friends, she said carefully, and see where it goes from there. Dante's smile was cautious but genuine. I'd like that. They finished their coffee, making plans for Noah's upcoming 6th birthday, a party at the Dinosaur Museum, complete with both parents present and presenting a united front. It would be the first major milestone they'd celebrate together, the first public acknowledgement of their unconventional family structure. The party arrived with perfect spring weather, Noah's friends from school attended, along with a few carefully vetted security personnel who blended into the crowd as museum volunteers. Harper and Dante worked together seamlessly, managing logistics and crowd control, and the chaos of 15 excited 5- and 6-year-olds learning about prehistoric creatures. "This is nice," Dante said during a quiet moment, while Noah led his friends on an expedition to find the Triceratops. "Normal. The kind of thing I never thought I'd get to experience." "You're good at it," Harper admitted. "Better than I expected." "I have a good teacher." His eyes found hers, warm with something that looked like hope. "Thank you, Harper, for giving me this chance, for not running again when things got hard, for helping me become the kind of father Noah deserves." "You did that yourself. I stopped standing in your way." They stood together, watching their son explain dinosaur facts to his enthralled audience, and Harper felt the last of her armor finally crack open. This was their family now. Unconventional, carefully constructed, built on the wreckage of crisis and the foundation of change. It wasn't what she'd imagined when she'd run 5 years ago. But looking at Noah's joy, at Dante's transformation, at the future spreading before them with unexpected possibility, Harper thought maybe it was better. The party ended with Noah exhausted and happy, clutching new dinosaur books and toys, chattering about the best birthday ever. Dante drove them home, helped carry Noah upstairs when he fell asleep in the car, and stood in Harper's living room looking like he belonged there. "I should go," he said, but he didn't move toward the door. "Or you could stay," Harper heard herself say. "For dinner. Nothing fancy, just the 3 of us. If you want." Dante's expression shifted through surprise to something that looked like gratitude. "I'd like that very much." They cooked together while Noah napped off his birthday excitement, moving around Harper's small kitchen with surprising coordination. They talked about Noah's upcoming school year, about Dante's legitimate business ventures, about the therapy both of them had started to process their past and build healthier futures. When Noah woke, they ate dinner as a family, pasta and laughter, and the easy comfort of people learning to trust each other. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was partnership, friendship, the foundation for something that might eventually become more. After dinner, Dante helped with bedtime, reading stories about the Cretaceous period, answering Noah's endless questions, tucking him in with the kind of gentle care that spoke to practice and genuine love. "Daddy?" Noah asked as Dante turned to leave. It was the first time he'd used the word. Dante froze, something raw crossing his features. "Yes? Are you and Mama going to get married again?" The question hung in the air, innocent and complicated. Harper appeared in the doorway, having heard it from the hallway. "We're not sure yet, buddy," Dante said honestly. "But we both love you very much, and we're learning to be a family. That's what matters." "Okay. I just wanted to know." Noah yawned, already drifting towards sleep. "I like having a daddy." "I like being your daddy." They left him sleeping, moving to the living room where the question still lingered between them. Harper poured wine, handing Dante a glass, and they sat on opposite ends of her couch in comfortable silence. "I wasn't expecting that question," Harper said finally. "Neither was I. But Harper, I want you to know I'm not pressuring you toward anything. If we stay co-parents and friends for the rest of our lives, that's enough. But what if it could be more?" Harper turned to face him, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. "What if we actually tried? Not rushing, not forcing it, just seeing if the people we've become can build something the people we were couldn't." Dante set down his wine glass carefully. "Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying maybe we start over. Maybe we actually date like normal people who want to get to know each other. Maybe we see if there's something worth building beyond co-parenting. And if there's not, if we try and discover we're better as friends, at least we'll know." "I'd like that." Dante's voice was rough with emotion. "I'd like that very much. But Harper, you need to understand, I'm not the man you married 6 years ago. I've changed, but I'm not perfect. I still make mistakes. I still have to actively choose to do things differently. I've changed too. I'm not the woman who ran because she was too afraid to fight for what she needed. I'm stronger now, more willing to advocate for myself and for Noah. So maybe we can meet in the middle, as the people we've become instead of the people we were." They talked late into the night, establishing boundaries and expectations, discussing what dating would look like with a 5-year-old son who already had opinions about their relationship. They agreed to take it slow, to prioritize Noah's stability, to maintain the co-parenting structure that was working while exploring whether they could add romance to the foundation of partnership. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was complicated and uncertain and built on hard-won trust instead of easy passion. But looking at Dante across her modest living room, at the man who'd learned about dinosaurs and transformed his empire and chosen to become someone different, Harper thought maybe complicated and uncertain was exactly right. They'd started in crisis. They'd built partnership through negotiation. Now they were choosing to try for something more, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And for the first time in 6 years, Harper let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, they could actually make it work.